There, I think it's recording. Thank you, Shauna and Aaron.
Is there any other public comment?
I have one.
Go ahead, Deb.
This is Deb White. And so there's a lot of things to address, a lot of concerning things. When you work in public education, everybody from custodians to superintendent always work uncompensated time. But this situation has led us to do a great deal of uncompensated time prepping. And I just want to mention that to make that really highlight that point, that it's much more than what we're used to doing, what we usually do because we're professionals. I'd also like you to consider that the state of Massachusetts has pushed back the start of school for 10 days to allow their staff to have compensated time to prep. We're back in 2 weeks, and that is just really unnerving because I know they're in the process of being developed, but the actual checklist of what we need to do in whatever model is chosen, the unknown makes it really, really difficult to fully comprehend what our job expectations are going to be. For example, one of the job expectations that I have heard, I don't know for certain, that I will be expected to do is to clean my classroom in the 3 minutes between classes. It's a time I usually answer a question from a student who's coming in or who is leaving my classroom. I might set up for the next class. I might even try to go to the bathroom in those 3 minutes. But if I'm cleaning the classroom, I won't have time for any of that in those 3 minutes. And at ASA, teachers have to figure out how they're going to clean while teaching, particularly our pre-K, K, and first grade staff. And that's just overwhelming to think about, much less to plan how it's going to go. And the one last thing I would really like you to reconsider is the statement that productivity is better when we are all at school in our remote rooms rather than working from home. And I don't agree with that. I think we are all professionals, and when we're working remotely, we should, because our students shouldn't be out and about, then we shouldn't be out and about either. I know that my administrator this past spring popped into a variety of classes just to say hi, just like he would do in physical school. So if accountability is an issue, there's a way to monitor that. But I really don't understand how things can work more smoothly remotely when I'm physically in the building versus when I'm physically at home, when the access at school still needs to be via a video chat, a phone call, an email. So those are some of the meanderings I've been thinking about since our last meeting. And I really appreciate you listening and considering some alternatives.
Thank you for bringing those perspectives. Any other public comment?
If I could have a minute to speak, Jessica Barnes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi there. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Jessica Barnes, and I am the art teacher at Orono High School. This will be my 16th year. Some of this may be addressed later in the meeting, but I'm going to speak at this part of the public comment because I have 2 children that I need to get to bed and I might not be able to be on for the second part. So first of all, again, as Deb said, we have 2 weeks until we're in the building. That's 14 days. That's not a lot of time. And there seems to be so much that is still so fluid. And I understand that part of that is the nature of what we're dealing with and that we do need to be flexible. But we are, as employees, being asked to make decisions based on very little information. We don't know what the plan is. If somebody in our building tests positive, there's been no information brought to us about that. We're working with potential numbers that parents have brought forward in their surveys that are potentially in flux. I know some parents have put in that they're going to be attending in the elementary school to hold their slots, but they may, deciding after, you know, whatever the plan is that's released in today's meeting or in the next few weeks, to pull those kids. So we don't really know the exact number that we're dealing with. And if we have, I'll just use the high school as an example, kids that show up the first few days of school and decide that, you know, the in-person learning isn't really for them, that it's too rigid and they want to switch over to remote, I don't know that we can really deny them that right. And that's going to skew a lot of things for us in a planning sense. Another thing that has come to mind is the academic calendar. We have a lot of Monday holidays. So if we're looking at cohorts on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, what does that mean for the Wednesday deep cleaning? If you have elementary kids and parents that are looking for childcare, it puts elementary parents sort of in a financial bind. If they're on the Thursday, Friday cohort, they're still responsible for 3 days of childcare, where if we move the Monday, Tuesday cohort to Tuesday, Wednesday, those parents only have to find, you know, 2 days of childcare on some weeks. And so that's something to consider. And I think that's it, but I just wanted to put those things out there. Thank you.
Thank you for raising those points. Any other public comment?
I have something to say. I'm Katie Stevenson. I have 4 children that go to Orono schools. I will say I haven't been able to attend any previous board meetings, and I'm not sure I'll be able to stay for the entire meeting. I'm going to try tonight. I find it a little disheartening to hear educators speaking up and saying that they're kind of clueless about how we're going forward right now. I think that does raise a lot of red flags for starting in the next 2 weeks. Deb White had a good point about how Massachusetts has bumped things back to give educators an opportunity to prepare. I think that maybe we should consider that as a community. I have a son who has pretty bad asthma. So as I was filling out my survey, I was really trying to remain flexible in my mind, because I'm a nurse as well, and I'm trying to take into consideration his health, the implications that COVID would have if he were to be exposed to it, but also his mental health and his social health. So I'm trying to really make a well-rounded decision. I'm thinking it's going to be pretty lax as far as, you know, go with the flow, because that's kind of the nature of COVID. It changes every day, so we don't really know what to do about it at this point. So I felt a little bit of pressure having to make a decision for an entire semester on what kind of schedule I want my child to have. I understand scheduling the appropriate amount of educators to be present and staffing and whatnot, but COVID hasn't given us a straightforward schedule, so it's hard for me to make a straightforward schedule for my children. I think it'd be important to have that flexibility of, you know, wow, numbers seem to be kind of going up a little bit, or this isn't working for my child. I think I need to pull back a little bit. I'm not sure how to go about that. I wish I had a really easy answer for that, but I think it's really important that if we're going to go forward with in-person teaching, which I think is really important through this pandemic, I think we have to be exceptionally flexible with families somehow.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
If I could, Carissa Tilbury, I have 2 thoughts. So I really do appreciate the educators coming out and saying their concerns. As a parent, I also am concerned, particularly about, I haven't seen any sort of establishment of thresholds of what are we willing to accept? Where do we call it in terms of going all remote? Because I think that's probably likely an inevitable situation that we're going to be facing this semester. And it's really difficult to answer the survey questions. And I totally understand logistically why, you know, you're asking parents to commit to a semester, but without knowing what your firm sort of thresholds are going in. And this was a topic at the faculty meeting at UMaine too, because as human beings, we're going to want to push and push and push because we all want to have life as normal. But if we could set that threshold of where it is that we need to call it quits now, so that we don't find ourselves in this sort of temptation-filled zone of when should we call it to be safe. So I think it's important to establish those thresholds now before it's too late. And then just another thought that I had about just drop off in general for school, because a lot of parents are going to be now dropping their kids off that would have otherwise ridden the bus. So is there any update on traffic flow and what that might look like? Like, do you have to give people like drop off times and stagger it and make sure that, you know, families are coupled together, so it's not like you're asking a family to drop off one kid and then 45 minutes drop off the next kid, because that's not practical. And I realize that this is a huge logistical puzzle to put together, but I think that that's going to be important, because I can envision already this pretty long line of cars waiting to be dropping their kids off. And that also impacts, you know, sort of the start of the day as well. So, you know, you've done a really good job putting together a plan where you have staggered students, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for the hybrid option. But I wonder if there's some thought that should go into like even staggered start times and how that looks like in the classroom as another option to just mitigate the numbers of people in a room at a particular point in time.
Thank you. And I should just explain for people who are new to watching that we don't engage in discussion during public comment, but we will be talking about many of these topics during the time later in the agenda. And we have had a number of question and answer sessions, and I expect we'll have more question and answer sessions coming soon to answer specific questions if we don't answer them later this evening, which I expect we will in many cases. And you know, our emails are all published on the website. People are welcome to email us as well. Any other public comment?
Hi, this is Kristen Gordon. I have 2 middle school children, and I just wanted to share some concerns that I have related to how things went at the end of the school year for 2020. I have 2 children that are completely different personality-wise. One feels very strongly about she wants to go back to school, and the other one is terrified about going back to school because of possible exposure to COVID. And the thing that I'm concerned about is with the hybrid option, the availability of teachers during the days that they would not be the students would not be physically in the building. So what I found with both of my children, especially as we moved closer and closer to the end of the school year, is that they really were not able to self-direct in their studies. And I definitely appreciate where Debbie's coming from and definitely agree with her. But with my particular students, what we were experiencing is there were a lot of teachers that were not holding a, let's say, regular class. So my children would sign in for 5 minutes and get an assignment, and that was it. And then if they had any questions, they could email the teacher or try to Zoom them or something like that. But I'm a nurse and I work in the medical field, and had several conversations with Peter Buhner about, I'm at work trying to deal with the medical side of things, and my kids are calling me all day long while I'm at work because I'm not working from home. I don't have the ability to really help them in giving them direction about how to stay organized and things like that. So I think that the hybrid option is definitely a great option, but I hope that you will really take into consideration availability for students that really need some more direction. And also what I'm wondering is, what is the plan for the cleaning on Wednesday? Is that something that teachers are going to be expected to participate in, so that that's also going to further limit their availability to the students? And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we probably will address most of those later. We have time for 1 or 2 more public comments, if anybody has one. Okay, I'm not hearing more public comment. Thank you. Really appreciate the input and the perspectives. And as I said, we will have future Q&A sessions. But we also have a full agenda tonight, so we do need to turn to the board agenda. First up is acknowledgments. Meredith, you want to do the big one?
Good evening. I would like to share some information with you. Sorry, I have too many papers in front of me. So we have, I know that probably at this point in our school community, maybe a lot of you have heard this news, but we wanted to have a kind of a, as formal as we can get via Zoom, recognition of Joe Mason, our custodian down at Ace Adams. Joe's on the Zoom today. Joe, if you'll wave, and so you come up on everyone's, there he is. So Joe was honored recently with a statewide award for excellence. It's the Custodian of the Year award that the state awards each year, and it's called the A. Burley Oxton Award for Excellence. And in just telling a little bit about this award, I would like to read the nomination letter that was submitted about Joe, because I think it so fittingly captured what he means to the school community and why he was so worthy of this award. So if you'll just indulge me for a moment, this letter was written by Cammie Carter, who is an ASA parent and also works on the high school staff. A student bounced into Asa Adams this past fall, so proud of her new water bottle. She showed it to anyone who would take the time to look. As she was proudly showing it off, she went to take a sip and her new treasure slipped through her fingers and shattered on the floor. She was devastated and wailed her discontent. Her day was ruined. No learning could happen for her that day. Except in comes Mr. Joe. He quickly cleaned up the mess. Then miraculously, by the end of the day, Mr. Joe had found the student a new water bottle to replace the broken one and delivered it to her hands. This is the kind of custodian Joe Mason is. He is great at his job, yes, but he does so much more than just his job. As a teacher at Orono High School, my daughter attends Asa Adams School in Orono. Joe Mason, the head custodian here, is a light for every student, teacher, and administrator, and is with great pleasure that I nominate him for this award. Mr. Joe, as he's affectionately known, greets every student by name as he passes them in the hallway. He's a phenomenal custodian, constantly cleaning and maintaining spaces in an orderly and sparkly way, but he goes above and beyond that by adding to his school community with humor, care, and kindness. Mr. Joe hides ninja plastic figurines around Asa Adams for students to find as a weekly challenge. He's the school gardener, tending to and maintaining the school's greenhouse during his off hours. He even plans lessons connected to the school's Habits of Mind curriculum to teach students how to plant. He partners with teachers and helps keep the whole school green, helping teacher to nurture their plants, being in contact with MOFGA, it's agriculture, I know, I can't remember all the, what all those letters stand for, and helping with the Orono Farmers Market at Asa Adams during the winter season, and planning guests and visitors for each classroom to learn more about locally sourced food and farming and gardening. He's a state champion disc golfer and partners with PE teacher Nick Butler to plan 4th grade disc golfing that gets kids outside and learning a lifelong sport. He also is a trivia buff and stops by the high school in his daily mail run throughout the district and offers a bit of trivia or a fun fact or interesting things to know. Often his tidbit makes its way into the Red Riot Report emailed daily out to all high school students and staff. Mr. Joe is much more than a custodian for ASA. He is beloved by all students, teachers, and staff. He's a figure in the community of care, compassion, and humor. We're so lucky to have him working in our district and know he's a worthy recipient of the Maine School Maintenance Custodian of the Year, A. Burley Oxton Award for Excellence. So I couldn't have said it better. I wanted to use Cammie's words. So thank you, Cammie, for taking the time to nominate Joe, because everything that he wrote here, everyone in the school community who knows Joe knows that's absolutely true. So congratulations, Joe. Thank you, Cammie. I see you there. Congratulations, Joe, on this award.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Cammie,
Great job.
appreciate that. It's been quite overwhelming, honestly. I just kind of do what I do. And the fact that I've been able to, you know, under Darcy and under Darren, to do the readings and bump into a school schedule that's already jam-packed. It's just been fun, and growing stuff with the kids through the Habits of Mind groupings has been fun, especially when they told me they took like things that they grew back to the classroom and shared with them and kind of spread that out. So yeah, I just do what I do. We do it for the kids, and this is, I appreciate it so much. Cammie, thank you. And thanks to, you know, Brent for giving me that flexibility, and Meredith for letting me be a little bit more than just someone who cleans.
Well, thank you for doing all of those things that are truly remarkable for, as this award recognizes. And I know that we would all love to be together to honor you. So we look forward to someday soon when maybe we can do that. So congratulations, and
Thank you.
know that the whole school community is so excited for you to have this honor.
Yeah, it's been really cool. Thank you. Thank you to the group that's been meeting too about getting back to school. It might be, I don't know, underappreciated. That might be the wrong word, but you're spending a lot of time to get us back, and thank you for that.
Anyone else like to say anything? All right, I think I took all the time allowed here. So thank you, Joey. I like the clap hands. I see Debbie's clap, virtual claps.
Very much.
I just
Lots
wanted
of
to-
nice words in the chat too.
Thanks. I'll look. Thanks.
Hey, Joe, I just wanted to add that we built a tree house, and my kids have been arguing all day who gets to be the custodian of the tree house. And I think that that's because they've had your influence.
Let me know if you need input.
And I also, on a side note, can I quickly acknowledge the renovation reveals that you and Meredith have been doing? I have really enjoyed those and appreciated that.
Thanks.
Does the board, nothing's going to measure up to that, but does the board have any other acknowledgements to make? Okay, I would just acknowledge, I know the administration and many teachers and nurses and librarians and others, and also a number of community members have put in a lot of time over the summer. This has been a very crazy summer, and trying to figure out as best as we can. It's probably hard to get your head around if you haven't been sitting in these committees, how many things have been discussed and talked about. So I appreciate all of that extra work that's been going on this summer. Meredith, you had some more?
Yes, 3 actually. One is I want to acknowledge really a group of individuals who all work to make this happen over the course of both the spring and as we finish the year and through the summer. Our community donated almost $7,000 in gift cards for mainly food needs and to support families during this time that were distributed. I know Cammie and others were a big part of making this happen, and so Cammie sent us the email to kind of capture everything that was donated. So that's really significant to add to what our food service program is, to really fill the gap for families in our community. So just acknowledgement of the entire school community and the people who organize this to make it happen. Also, we got a couple of great news pieces in the last month or so. Meg Dreyer applied for sorry, it's loud. They're doing something loud outside. If that's echoing, we might have to close the doors. She applied for the Dear Ago Reads kind of partnership and was selected. So that means that all of our first graders for the coming year will receive a new book every month this school year from Dear Ago Reads. So that's a great gift to our students, and what a real lift for them as they return to school this fall, to have that wonderful surprise waiting on them throughout the year. So thanks to Meg for seeking that out and bringing that to our district, and thank you for the Dear Ago Reads organization and the Cashmans who run that organization. Finally, we received another grant from the Full Plates Foundation. They gave us some money early on in our spring remote learning to help augment our costs for our food service program. They gave us another grant in the amount of $6,000 this summer, and that helped us run the delivery program throughout the summer that we were only going to have pickup, and we ended up being able to add the delivery aspect back to that. So we want to thank Ben for seeking that, but also the Full Plates organization for that grant.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to presentations. We've added a presentation from, I think, Chris Crocker on the Galapagos trip.
Yeah, so Chris is on the call. I saw her earlier, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris to kind of talk to everyone about this information she's bringing forward. So Chris?
Hi there.
They have a copy of your letter as well, so.
Perfect. So I want to take a moment just to thank you guys for allowing me this time to bring this topic to you. I know you have a lot on your plate, and I didn't know it was going to fall on such an important night, but be that as it may, I'm not sure if you all saw the document that I had put in your papers, but historically, I'll just do a little brief rundown of it. Historically, I start signing students up for our trip a year before we travel. And so middle of last year, we started doing the signups for the trip. Right now, the trip is to the Galapagos Islands and Ecuador. It's called the Galapagos Highlights, and it's scheduled to run April 14th to the 22nd of 2021. So this April. So then typically I go to the board and ask for approval for this trip, usually in like October or November. But with the current COVID situation, I really wanted to come to you folks earlier than normal to get your recommendation on what we should do, what I should do. And I think I outlined 3 possibilities in that document. So the first possibility is leave the trip as planned. Between 45 and 60 days, Explorica will make a decision. They obviously partner with the CDC, the WHO, the WHO, and the DOS, and they obviously won't send us anywhere that's not safe. A lot of the borders are closed right now. Most of their trips are being canceled and postponed or rerouted. So we could just hold tight, and 45 to 60 days before the trip, they would make a decision and say, you're not going anywhere. We need to switch this. If that happens, whatever we decide, there's no extra fee or cost involved in that. The second option is to be proactive and move the trip to the summer of 2021. This might increase the cost. Actually, I did find out that it would increase the cost a couple of $100 for the students. I don't know if giving us a couple of extra months is going to do too much, because that would be from April to, let's say we move it to July. That's just a couple of extra months to maybe have a vaccine come out and be accessible to everyone. Or the third option is to move the trip to April of 2022. If this is a decision that I make or we make, there'd be an increased cost per student of $92. If it's something that Explorica decides after, if we picked option 1 and we sat tight, and then they say, no, you can't leave, 45 days before the trip, they say, no, you can't go, you can move it to April of 2022, then there's no increase in cost, okay? But the downfall for that one is we do have 2 seniors that are signed up, and April of 2022, they most likely will be, I don't know where they'll be. So they will have graduated from our school. So that would cause a problem there. So I don't know if you have any questions or anything, but I'm really looking to you folks for guidance on this. Yeah.
So
So-
Chris, go ahead, Meredith.
Well, I was just going to say, ask if you and Reg had talked, if Reg had any further thoughts on this as well to add to the picture.
Yeah, when Chris and I talked, the idea was to just update the board on the current situation, not necessarily ask for a decision, but just to let the board know where we are in the planning of this trip. So kind of pros and cons of all three options. I thought Chris did a nice job laying it out. So, but I just want to keep you guys in the loop on this trip that's coming up in April. And we're concerned about sending a group down to Ecuador 6 or 8 months from now. And just want to keep you guys informed as we go forward.
Yeah, I would, I guess I would say, you know, it seems like we would want to postpone the decision as far out as we can. If there's a kind of a window of when that's an opportunity, I see, I guess, is there a window of opportunity for the summer of 2021 and 2022, Chris?
So there, yeah, we can change it to the summer of 2021. And if then at that point, we still can't travel, we can move it again to the April of 2022 or summer of 2022. The difference is if we make the decision to move it, there'll be a cost increase. If we just hold tight and they decide it because the CDC says, no, you're not traveling, you know, it's not safe yet, then there's no cost incurred to us. There's no added cost, and they can postpone, people can back out and get their money back in all of those situations. So I've never been in, well, nobody's been in this situation before, and I'm just at a loss. Is one of my largest groups right now. And yeah, I just don't feel comfortable. Like, I just like guidance or recommendations, and we don't have to have it now. People, you guys can think about it. I can get emails. I just really want to, like Reg said, share with you the situation, what's going on. There is a trip planned. People are putting money in, you know, each month for this trip.
So just maybe to rephrase, so do we have a window of 45 to 60 days before the trip to also make a different decision?
I think at that point,
they do.
No, if we wait that long, we'd be losing money. That would be their decision to make, this, according to the CDC and all those other organizations. So we couldn't wait 45 days before the trip and say, no, we don't feel comfortable sending you, even though the CDC says it's fine. So yeah, and that's the situation.
How long can we wait for?
I can ask that question. I don't think he's given me a number of days.
You know, I think I'm inclined to agree with Meredith that we'd want to wait on this as long as we can, as the situation is so fluid. I think the important piece of information to know is when, I mean, we know they have 45 to 60 days. How long do we have before we have to actually make a decision of, yes, we're going to go, or no, we're not, and forfeit the money. So I think that's the piece of information we need to know.
Okay, I can find that out.
Yeah.
I also ask, our students that are currently signed up today, can they withdraw right now if they choose to, just based on all the uncertainty, or are people tied in with deposits or something at this?
Well, people are tied in, but they can. I've had 3 freshmen leave over the summer. They've decided they're freshmen, they have plenty of time to travel later, and parents weren't comfortable keeping them in, and they left. And then surprisingly, I actually had 1 sign on, which was exciting in that respect. But it depends how much insurance they got. If they got the all-inclusive insurance, they can back out anytime and get all of it back, but $75. So it all depends. I think I wrote a little paragraph there. If they canceled due to COVID, then there's not a problem. But if they decide that they're out because they don't want to take the chance or take the chance of losing money or whatever, they would have to contact the company and find out what's going on.
And I
and how much
assume
money.
anybody that decides they want to be out right now can be out because of COVID, I would assume.
Maybe, I don't think so with the policy. Oh, and I forgot, I was actually going to lead with this and I forgot. Explorica is the company we're traveling with, and they are a partner of World Strides. Well, they bought each other, and they just filed for Chapter 11. So, and I did tell my parents this because I just found out. Now, I've been in contact with them. They told me that this will not affect the trip in any way. So.
Of course, it could affect whether we get refunds or not, depending on how deep the bankruptcy goes. I guess, yeah, I mean, this is the reason we have a policy that the board has to approve international trips. I've never seen a circumstance where there was a genuine concern before, but there obviously is this time, so I appreciate it, keeping the board informed. It's almost impossible for me to imagine that I would be voting to send students to Ecuador in April between the air travel and the level of COVID that has hit in Latin America. But I agree with Mark. It's really just a game of chicken of seeing how long we have and how long they have and trying to get them to cancel instead of us cancel. So as long as we know we have that flexibility, I would support kind of keeping in the game. But it's hard for me to imagine a trip actually going off in April at this point in time.
Right, and that's why I was wondering if being proactive and moving it to April of 2022. But if you think it's better to just hold off and then make them make that decision, and then there's no cost incurred on the travelers because of that, because it's our change and not their change.
Yeah, I guess that sounds like the thing. We should research some more.
Okay.
They probably have their policies set up so that they get to decide and we lose money, but it's the way travel companies work. But we should at least see how far we can push that.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Are the trips transferable? So for the seniors, if we move it off, could somebody else, sort of buy out their spots in the future?
Absolutely. So the two seniors, I have one senior that has a sibling, and so a younger sibling, so they could transfer that over, no problem. And then the other one who doesn't have a sibling, if someone else decides they want to go, they could just jump in their spot, and that person wouldn't lose any money at all if we can find someone to take their place. So that would be good. So. Okay, thank you for your time. Oh,
Thank you. All right, next up we have a superintendent report.
So while most of our time is spent working on all things reopening and pandemic response, there are a number of other things happening as well. I think Aaron mentioned the construction updates, and I want to acknowledge Deb White, who's taken the lead and asked for us to send her some footage. So Deb's really taken the lead in getting those produced and out with some student support as well. But there's a lot happening around campus. If you've driven by, you can see it. They're working on really the first phase, which was to have this work completed for the start of school that they're currently engaged with. So that's what's happening right now at the high school, for example. It's mainly building the extension of the back parking lot that's directly behind the middle school gym, and the retention pond that has to go in that area as well. So they're working on getting that completed so we have sufficient parking for the start of school. And then down at ASA, you've probably seen there's quite a bit of demolition they're trying to complete prior to the start of school to get things prepped and ready for having some barriers in between the interior walls and where they're going to be doing construction in that area where they've just done a lot of demolition. So certainly lots of things are happening around the district, and they'll continue to do so, but exciting progress is being made certainly on that front. I think it's been mentioned that 2 weeks from today, our teachers return. A little over like 3 weeks and a few days, our students return. So the beginning of the year is imminently upon us. Certainly when the calendar turns to August, it always feels that way, but this year it feels even more so. Our new employee orientation is the end of next week. And so those things are beginning to, come into our immediate focus, and the teacher return, we've been working on information to get out to staff about what those days are going to look like. Primarily, they're going to look like some large group Zoom meetings, so everyone's hearing the same thing, but more time in small groups, or with individual time to really plan and be ready. Moving those 4 days from the spring to the fall, we're going to use every bit of that time. Staff, as someone, Deb pointed out earlier, staff will need that time and more, really. So, it'll also go into some of the next 3 days that we have that are our typical days. I'm really glad that we have those 4 days with teachers back, so they have some time together to plan and help put the final touches on some of the logistics that everyone needs to kind of work together to finish the kind of training and logistical thinking around. So those will be really important days. We've been doing a lot of ordering that we don't normally do this time of year for 2 reasons. One, the budget was later this year because of just how things got delayed with the budget referendums, with the state referendum getting moved to the middle of July, but also just because of COVID related needs. So all kinds of things from tents to outdoor classroom materials, air purifiers, fans, new furnishings that we've determined we needed, face shields, plexiglass, water filling stations. So lots of things right now that we aren't typically ordering this time of year are really consuming some staff time. We also had a initial meeting of our child care work group who's just thinking through potential solutions to be able to provide. We are in the early stages of that. I know the irony of that I just said how close school is. We're trying to figure out things as much as we can on as many fronts as we can. So we have a team of people kind of working together to think about that. I think that's the majority of what I wanted to say, because everything else really falls under some other agenda items.
Any questions for the superintendent? Okay, we'll go ahead and move into the next item, which is school reopening plans, starting with recommendation and school planning.
Information that we shared a couple weeks ago. The information we shared a couple of weeks ago we've been working from that framework to think more in school-based planning teams to work on some of the details. And so tonight we have some greater details to share with you, or in some places greater details, in other places kind of an indication of the things that are being worked on. Really expanding the kind of thinking at the school level really digs into those details, some of which were brought up during public comment. So I know the principals are going to speak to this in just a moment, and they can address some of those aspects when they're talking about the aspect of school-based planning. And then we're working on some district-wide protocols, some of which were also mentioned in the earlier public comment. So one of the things kind of to start with, I put in the shared folder the survey analysis that we've done as of this morning. And just for the board, you received one earlier and then you received one now, and the one now is just slightly updated. Kristen and I had to reconcile some numbers of enrollments. And so you can see how those survey response rates have come in. The schools have been trying to track down, make calls, get the remainder in. Congratulations goes out to second grade at ASU, has 100% response rate. So they're the winners here. So great job getting that in. And I know Ms. Briggs spent a lot of time on the phone today trying to make that happen. So we're getting there. And, these numbers have really helped us begin to think about staffing and think about how we can put together, the pathways that we are thinking about putting together. And it really has informed some of our thinking in, the grades that we think we have the capacity for a full return, and the grades that we think need to be at hybrid, and also, begin to think about how we serve those remote students with staffing, given that whole picture. So you can see that there's, clearly some data that's yet to be gathered for people that we're still waiting on. About 25% at the middle and high school, only about 9% at ASA. So as we get more and more data in, it'll just help us kind of do some final refinement. But based on this data, we have kind of adjusted slightly what we think we have the capacity to do. And we're still talking through some of the details on this. We knew that we were getting survey results in, late last night, and tried to get more today, and are trying to look at that and bring you more information for this meeting. So my personal goal all along was to try to have pre-K to 2 as much in-person time as we could. To me, those are the highest priority learners, to see, what would it take to have those students be given the opportunity to be full in person. And when we talked about this last, pre-K to 1, it seemed like there was, a way to make that happen. And second grade, we needed to wait and see what the survey results were. Similarly, we looked at the middle school kind of with a similar lens to see, is there any way to think about those kids who are transitioning, that sixth grade group, would it work to be able to bring them back full time as we start the year? So those are things we were kind of looking at, trying to think about. At the high school, because it works differently, it's hard for us to imagine how we can do that from the start. It just doesn't, the kids are mixed in lots of different, multi-grade classes during their day, and it's hard to think about how to do one grade level in the same way that we're looking at the other buildings. So given all of that, we have this kind of, I still say it's a tentative return plan, because it's, people want answers and they want to know, but it's always going to be subject to change. Conditions change, and staffing's going to change, and, the situation with COVID can change. And so this is what we are looking at for trying to design a schedule and a staffing plan and safety protocols to accomplish this that I have on this page for the start of the year, the pre-K to 2 and sixth grade, to see if we can make that work. Part of being able to do that, I'm going to talk about something that I need to ask you to approve to be able to accomplish this. So that's the adjustment that's changed kind of in the kind of big picture lens, is in looking at the data. I feel like it's, the numbers are such that We can bring back second grade and sixth grade full return to start the year. And I think for ASA, that really feels like my own personal kind of ceiling for what I'm comfortable with in terms of an overall load on the building as we start the year. Certainly, if you look at other grades and look at the staffing, you can say, well, you know, it looks like this other grade has similar ratios potentially. There are two things that are really three considerations there. One is the load on the building and thinking about what do we think we can manage to start the year as we're building routines, new procedures, all the logistics that were mentioned, like drop off and pick up. There's just a lot that's different under this. And so having that lower load in the building on any given day, of having those other three grades in hybrid will make a big difference. Similarly with, you know, the middle school and thinking about, you know, the numbers in the middle school, certainly they're lower than the other buildings, but still, you know, they have a smaller square footage as well that they're working within. So thinking about just that one grade seems to be maybe the next place to go in terms of with the numbers looking like in classrooms it would work, and thinking about the hallways with 7th and 8th still hybrid. And then high school, the recommendation remains the same. So to accomplish that, I'm going to talk to you in a few minutes, not just in that particular light, but in kind of some other discussions we've been doing about some staffing needs that I see. So we'll get to that in a moment, but I want to turn it over to the principals to kind of talk through what they have been doing at the building level with their planning and work to add to this picture. So, Reg, do you want to start?
Sure. So we do have a building-based committee that's met twice last week, and then we met today as we get into the details of what it looks like at Orono High School. I was going to break it down into this document that was received by the board, but it probably didn't get it until this afternoon. So physical distancing. Can you hear me, or did I lose my? Okay. So the classrooms will all be set up kind of with this instructional zone at the beginning at the front of the classroom near the board. And then the student seating will be all, 6-foot separation between students. We have ordered plexiglass dividers for all the teacher desks and ed techs and support staff. And then we'll stagger release times from classes so that when they're changing classes, it'll be 30 seconds or a minute in between, probably 4 groups of release. Arrival time, we're going to have 3 locations that students will report to if they arrive early. And early means probably before 7:30. I anticipate we would still open the building at 7, but we'll have the gym set up with the bleachers so the students can sit in the bleachers 6 feet apart. We'll have the cafeteria set up with the same kind of 6-foot spacing. And we'll have an outdoor tent where we will have seating in there, but it's outdoors, so they can be maybe a little closer. But we'll have three spaces that will be supervised. And then dismissal at the end of the day, same, we'll probably release at 2:10 and probably instead of 2:14, probably send the bussers first. We'll stagger the bussers, the walkers, commuters, and those get picked up by parents. Lunches, we're planning on 3 lunches, expecting between 150 to 180 students in the building each day in cohort A and cohort B. So 3 lunches of about 50 to 60 students. The cafeteria, we're going to remove the existing round tables. They're just not efficient as far as spacing students 6 feet apart. Students will have their masks off, obviously, during lunch. So they do need to be 6 feet apart. So we'll have the cafeteria, we'll have the outdoor tent, the classroom furniture that's going to be removed to make room for 6-foot spacing in the classrooms, we'll locate some of that into the cafeteria. And we expect about 36 to 40 in the cafeteria and another 20 out in the tent. So we won't be using classrooms for lunch. Those will be the 2 spaces that students eat lunch. And as far as the corridors and traffic in general, Meredith has ordered floor decals to indicate traffic flow, 6-foot spacing in areas where there might be a line. We'll have one-way stairwells, so an up staircase and a down staircase. So that's the overall kind of big ticket items as far as health and safety. Academic considerations. There's been studies out this summer that have shown both singing and wind instruments project beyond 6 feet. And so we're removing the muse block from the schedule. You know, the muse block is where, you know, all the band students report the band, all the chorus students. So 50 students are going off to the band room, 50 to the chorus. And that's a model that I don't believe would work safely. If students need to be spaced 8 to 10 feet, we just don't have an indoor space where we could teach band and chorus with all the students in a large group at once. So we're going to figure out a small group instruction for band and chorus within the regular school day, and do as much in person as possible or remote if possible. The other thing that does, all of this is through the lens of just health and safety. And so by removing the muse block, that also removes one more group of students that teachers are interacting with. It removes one more transition during the day where students are passing to another class. And it reduces one more kind of group that students are interacting with. So those were the biggest items around just the wind instrument instruction, the chorus instruction, the passing, the number of groupings and regroupings. So we've got it down to just a 4-block schedule. And I had a faculty meeting on Friday, an optional faculty meeting. I had about 30 people show up, which I thought was pretty good in July. And we talked about 3 different options for the block schedule. We have our traditional maroon white, alternating days. Through a health and safety lens, we couldn't identify any health and safety gains by sticking with a maroon white alternating day schedule. It meant students would be regrouped over the course of 2 days with 8 or 9 different groupings. Teachers are exposed to 7 different groups of students. There's a larger footprint in the building with students. So we also discussed what's called a 4x4 block schedule, which one model would be all the maroon classes meet. I just realized I was blocking my camera with the paper. Sorry, people at home. Where the first semester would be the maroon classes, the second semester would be the white classes. It's a pretty common block schedule out there in the high school world. And then a third model would be, we stick with that 4x4 schedule, except we would alternate by quarter. So quarter 1 would be the maroon classes, the semester 1 maroon classes. Quarter 2 would be the semester 1 white classes. We could then at the end of the semester kind of see where we are COVID-wise and just continue with that rotation, or maybe go back to the alternating day schedule. Anyway, put out a survey. It was 72% in favor of that quarterly rotation. So 4x4 block schedule. Again, that cuts in half the number of groupings that students are interacting with, cuts in half the number of students that teachers are interacting with. And kind of secondarily, it does, on the student perspective, it means 3 or 4 classes that they'll be prepping for each day. I mean, the same 3 or 4 classes throughout the quarter. And from the teacher perspective, it would be 3 classes that they're prepping for the quarter. So with a hybrid model, thinking about students that are full remote and hybrid, it really has a lot of positives to go in that direction. So that's our scheduling plan. Shared staff, again, to limit the footprint. We want to basically assign each shared staff to a building. And those are basically our 3 music teachers, our 2 phys ed teachers, and our Spanish teacher. And we're working on assigning those building assignments with the thought that they would teach remotely any courses in another building. Enrollment wise, I'm not going to read through these. I've listed kind of the range of class sizes, at least for this first quarter. These are the maroon classes from the smallest to the largest class. And then lastly, we're looking at different hybrid models, that instructional model the teacher would be using. We're at the point now where, so what does this look like? These 2 days on, 3 days, remote. And so the 6 that, if you think of this as a menu that teachers would choose from, one possible model, and each of these include the remote students having a synchronous opportunity from home to participate in class. But one possible model would just be for teachers to consider their class like an online class, design it as an online class, and where their in-person instruction is supplemented. A second model would be really the 2 days that are in person, focus that instruction on kind of the core material. So in the cohort A, their instructional week would start on Monday. So Monday, Tuesday in person. The next 3 days would be remote, mostly asynchronous with some synchronous components. Then cohort B, their instructional week would start on Thursday and Friday. And then kind of asynchronous Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Another possibility would be first half of class is direct instruction with cohort A, the in-person group. Second half is synchronous with the remote cohort. Another option, this is 4 on the list, is the idea of beginning each day with a morning meeting, 20 or 30 minutes where students are either in person or they're logging in synchronously, where the teacher is kind of kicking off the day. This is the goal today. There's some instruction. And then students are kind of working, they have the work for the day. Another model is just, I think what a number of people had assumed would happen, but the remote students are just attending synchronously each day. So it could be almost like what's happening here. This is the in-person class and there's a bunch of people at home attending remotely. And then other models, we're just exploring other models. It's a relatively new idea of this hybrid. So, but those are 5. I'll speak personally. I'm going to be teaching my computer science class this fall, and I see it as kind of 5 days of synchronous instruction. My curriculum is very much kind of day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And in our meeting this morning, a number of teachers are thinking of it that way, that yes, I'm going to, we'll have Google Meets and the students at home will be attending via Google Meets, and I'll have a group that's in person, but they'll all be receiving the material kind of at the same time. But there were also a couple of teachers in the meeting that were like, well, I'd actually activities, the labs, the hands-on stuff while they're with me at school, and then while they're at home, they can do the reading and the work, and kind of that model cohort A gets instruction, then they're working kind of remotely. So really going to give teachers the leeway to decide what instructional model will work best in their content area. I think maths, science, maths, languages would lend themselves to that synchronous daily instruction. There might be some humanities, liberal arts classes that could do more asynchronous. So, and then finally, the planning committee was in full agreement that the students who are full remote, that they opt for the full remote, would just remain embedded in their current schedule. they would remain on that teacher's roster, and they would just be attending synchronously as part of the rest, whatever the class is synchronous. And so they really saw that as, and I agree, at the high school level, it's, so those are some of the big picture items.
Great, that's helpful. Just one quick question or clarification. I don't want to get all the way around the principles, but I bet parents are thinking this, those max class sizes are before the hybrid split, right?
Yes.
So it's really half of that that's going to be in the
Right.
in a classroom.
Right, exactly. Yep, roughly half. So,
yep.
And that's a great point, because for teachers, as they start to visualize, you know, their classes would actually be between 6 and 12 students. I mean, on average, you start to picture the number of students who'll be traveling around the building. I feel like it becomes a much more manageable task. I'm hoping it does anyway.
Thanks.
Reg, I think you just said that if they are 100% remote, then they're just going to be attending synchronously every day. Is that right?
No, I said that's a possibility. I mean, that's one of the models, but they could, you know, so say I take the approach that I am having synchronous, it's in person and everyone at home is synchronous. They would just be part of that synchronous attendance every day.
Oh, I think I misunderstood that. I thought you were saying that
Yeah.
if for the students that choose to be 100% remote,
Yeah.
so they're not going to be synchronous every day, or they could be.
It
So what you
depends
just,
on, yeah. So say a teacher uses the science teacher I was talking about, they're going to use the model where I'm planning my labs, my activities for the in-person time. Let's say that's cohort A. They're there Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they're remote, and that might be more asynchronous. Well, the full remote students would also be assigned to a cohort A, cohort B. So they'd be attending synchronously for that in-person instruction.
Okay, just on that
If
cohort day.
Yeah, if that's the
Gotcha.
model the teacher uses. Yeah.
Gotcha. So they would still be in a cohort, and they would be just synchronous for those Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday,
Right.
Friday.
So they would be So they would be assigned to a cohort, just like everybody will be in a cohort, and they'll be attending synchronously the same days that their cohort is attending in person and synchronously.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. And as far as the 4x4 schedule, are we asking questions now individually, or is that fine? Versus waiting for all of them?
I would say that probably there's going to be a lot of information, so it might be good to clarify some high school questions now.
Okay.
And then,
Okay. So on the 4x4, then the schedules are already done. It's just going to be whether or not we choose to say maroon for the first quarter or white for the first quarter. So nothing would change other than the student, if they would just be attending for their 2 days they're here, they're attending their maroon day 2 days in a row.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Also, is there any chance of getting any extended lunchtime since we've gotten rid of the Muse, or no? Is that considered?
Well, we've added that Muse time into the blocks, so the blocks are longer.
Oh, you just distributed across?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you?
We've added also. So usually our travel time is 3 minutes, so we've made that 5 minutes. That transition time between classes. There's questions from some teachers. Will that be enough time? Will that 5 minutes be enough to do staggered release, wipe down desks, and all that stuff? So
there's flexibility there if you needed to add there. Then.
Yeah. But the Muse time went into the blocks.
It did. Okay. Gotcha. So these are just the options you just gave us are just some options, and it's going to be entirely left up to however the teachers choose to do their classes, is what I heard, correct?
Well, we're developing kind of across the district some tenets, some principles of our remote instruction. I mean, we haven't, I think one of them will be, there's going to be a synchronous component to, or or we're gonna have to define what that engagement is with students who are the days that they're remote. So,
Okay.
so, you know, teachers will have, put it this way, teachers are gonna have more freedom to design their instructional model than in the spring when it was, you know, everybody's doing this, but there's gonna be some expectations around, within that model, there's gonna be some consistent expectations around the kids who are working remotely. How would they, you know, checking in, and what's the synchronous component of that? So,
Okay. Thank you. And you mentioned stuff putting the marking the hall. Did you just decide to do down the middle and left right? Is that, I didn't.
yeah.
Okay. I think that's all for me.
Reg, did you say that the class sizes by content area would be cut in half, right? Basically, with the hybrid model?
Yeah.
And that's by alphabet?
I think that's what we're going to do. I think that will be a district level decision for, so that siblings are going to be in the same cohort and help with childcare. So, and I think we're just waiting to see what the results of the survey before we say, I'll say at the high school, if we did A through K, L through Z, it's almost a perfect 50% split.
In all classes.
So I think we're going to wait and see, you know, where the full remote land. And
Yeah, and we indicated on the survey that we were going to try to work with families who had needs. You know, there's some families on the survey that they've arranged their work schedule that they have off certain days of the week to support their kids at home. So we'll try to honor those as well as much as we can. But the default as a starting point would likely be an alphabetical divide, and then looking at trying to address some of those family express needs.
Thank you.
So you said you want us to ask school questions now? Well, first, Reg, I think I'd like to applaud the high school faculty for, it sounds like, looking to maximize the amount of synchronous components that they're going to provide to remote learners. I hope that we're doing that across the district, as much synchronous involvement as we possibly can, including up to and including maybe 100% synchronous if the situation allows it. So I think that sounds like most of the teachers are thinking about that. So that's great. I guess the one question I have is about the lunch arrangement. The outside option is great in September. If we're still in this model in December, obviously that's going to be a little bit more problematic. So what's plan B for lunch if this continues in the winter?
Yeah, plan B is the cafeteria and the gym. But yeah, it will get cold quickly. But
thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, one more. Where I think the middle school looked at it, brought on 6th grade. Have you plugged in bringing on 9th grade full time to see what that would look like? I know the high school is a different animal, but especially with kids coming from other districts, and you know, it's just like the young ones and the 6th graders coming into a new environment. Did you plug that in or consider that at all?
We definitely considered it. It's you know, our 9th grade is our biggest class.
I know.
And so it's around 115 at the moment, which is awesome, right? So that's a great problem to have, but it also makes it the most difficult class to try to bring back full time. So we've looked at it and having a hard time seeing how we would do that without really blowing up everything else. So.
All right.
Now, if I'm correct, that class is 114 in size, but it looks like if we did a full return to in-person, 19 of them would not attend, right? So we're really looking at under 100 on that class. Was that considered as well, or? I mean, I know it's a
Yep.
big class.
Yeah, yep, that was considered. You know, the seniors are the smallest class, so they would probably be on paper the easiest, but they're also the most diverse as far as taking electives and you know, the number of singletons that they sign up for. So that's, so the ninth graders have the most uniform schedule. They're all taking English 9, they're all taking, you know, kind of two options in social studies, kind of two. So from a uniformity standpoint, the ninth graders would be the easiest ones to schedule, but they're the biggest class. The seniors would be easy because they're the smallest class, but they're the largest different number of courses that they're taking. So that's the challenge that we're facing. And then the 10th and 11th graders somewhere in between.
And the fact that even though there's uniformity in a lot of places in a ninth grade schedule, it's not complete uniformity. And so it,
Right.
there are
Yeah.
mixed electives
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So it gets pretty complicated. And so for that reason, we really feel like starting with hybrid at the high school is the right choice. And then we can reevaluate and see if we feel like we can look at other options down the line. But, it's something that it's going to take us more time to really examine how that could possibly work.
Yeah. I think once the dust settles after the first couple of weeks, we'll see kind of what the class sizes are actually, attending each day, and we can bring back students. We don't have to do the ninth graders all at once, but we can focus on the ninth graders and say we can add 10 more ninth graders, and the rooms will hold these 10 ninth graders. And so I think we can take that approach.
So shall we shift to the middle school? Richard?
Can y'all hear me pretty good there with that? Okay. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, our process at the middle school. So recently, I think it was last week, I had a full staff meeting, had very good attendance. Almost everyone on staff was there. And we started to break down our priorities and planning for the reopening of school. And so one thing that's important to me as a school leader is communication, clear and regular communication with with our community stakeholders. And so I appreciate this opportunity by the board to review our plan, in advance up the start of school, and to solidify something that we can get information out to the community. And so last week was really an attempt by me to start to bring our plan together and frame it up for staff. So we established 3 kind of areas that we wanted to focus on. Number 1 was a communications committee. And so we're going to design our communications that are going to go out throughout the school year and have, another set of eyes on those. I revived the Crimson Chronicle, my parent newsletter, recently, and I'm going to continue that as a weekly publication. I don't normally send that out over the summer, but I feel that it's important to use that as a communication vehicle in these times, and then other things as necessary moving forward. So that's one branch. A second committee that we formed with the OMS staff is focused on school safety, and I outlined some of those things in that little one page that you have. And I talk with Reg like almost every day, and Christian pretty regular. And so I think Reg and I in particular, where we share kind of a sort of a common building area, there's a lot of similarities there. So I won't go down everything, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. So I measured classrooms. I measured them again after after we talked, Leo, and went around and came up with some, you know, reasonably accurate estimates. They are based on 6-foot distancing, and then I was able to design or come up with a number, a single number that I could tell a teacher, you know, you can fit 16 kids in here or 18 kids, something like that. So teachers are designing their own classrooms space based on those numbers. We did a lot of ordering. We have shields coming, masks. We ordered a lot of plexiglass to use, like portable type plexiglass to use around the building. Signage. Our committee is working on like how we're going to put signage up around the building. We're going to have arrows, you know, the traffic, there'll be a specific traffic flow. You know, you'll go this way in the hall and then that way upstairs perhaps. An upstairs that you can only go up, a downstairs that you can only come down. We're going to designate bathrooms for specific grade levels, etc. All of that type of thing. Lockers, we're not planning on using lockers to start the school year, just to reduce congestion in the hallway. And so our hope is that will just make things more manageable within and allow for students to easily socially distance. Arrival and dismissal time. So it's interesting because this question came up during the public comment, I believe. So we're going to divide students into 2 groups, 2 supervised groups in the morning when they arrive at school. Some will come into the gym, and I figure we can fit 50 approximately in here. And, you know, we can put space tape down on the floor or on the bleachers and spread kids out in the morning. Outside, just like the high school, we're going to have a tent on the front lawn, and we'll be able to fit kids out there socially distanced in the tent. So they would show up. My thinking is that they would show up at the regular time around 7:30, and they would be assigned to go to the tent or in the gym until it's time to go to period 1. And those areas would be supervised. Dismissal time, we have a little bit different process. So students would be dismissed by cohorts at the end of the day. So, you know, I might get on the loudspeaker and say, you know, grade 6 is dismissed at this time, wait a few minutes and dismiss grade 7 and then dismiss grade 8. Lunch is, that's been a bit of a challenge because I think when Meredith mentioned the load on the building, right? So when we bring in students, lunchtime is that kind of like, you know, there's only so much space. So, and Mark, to your question about with regard to Reg, we've designated 2 areas for lunch, the gym and the outside tent, you know, to start the school year. And what do we do when the weather gets cold? So at the middle school, traditionally we've had an advisory period, so a lunch and advisory this year. So lunch would come first, advisory would come second. So I'm kind of holding that. I thought about doing something like Reg did and spreading out taking the 25-minute of advisory and extending the periods. That was one option, but I really needed to think about the lunch. And so if we have a full return, I can't operate socially distant on one lunch, right? So I'm kind of saving that chunk of time and using it originally as an advisory type period, and then possibly using it as a second lunch period if we need it, if we have full return, or when the weather gets cold. So that's kind of the plan for lunch. I talked about traffic pattern. Okay, so so I think my premise is starting from like safety first and then get kids in. My goal has always been to get to a point where we can have full attendance, where we can have regular school, you know, and get back to normal. So I designed this, the schedule is designed to be as regular as possible, like for a middle school schedule. It doesn't deviate greatly from, last year's schedule as far as when kids are having class and how they're having class and the offerings that we offer. Having said that, we have had to make some adjustments, and we're continuing to look at it because of shared staff. If building, that alters how we might have to do things somewhat. Specifically, I can talk about music and PE. It doesn't impact our foreign language program because we just have the one foreign language teacher. So music and PE. And like Red said, I'm working with our music teachers because we have limits on what they can do around band and around chorus. So they are coming up with a plan to provide like an alternative music educational programming so I guess what I'm trying to say is at the designated band time, we're planning to have an offering, like a music offering that will take the place of that. Let's see, what else? So the third committee that we have in place is the instructional planning. And I'd say this is our other high priority area. The communications piece I can kind of handle. The safety piece is, we talked a lot about that in the reopening committee. And, we have a lot of guidance from CDC and the DOE, and there's a lot of stuff going around safety. We just have to kind of put those things in place. The instructional planning piece is our other, we're a school, we're an educational institution, and sound instructional planning needs to be what we really focus on. So I'd say that's our biggest committee. It involves, all teachers have the opportunity to have input. I have a smaller core group designing our instructional plan moving forward. And I want to highlight a couple of things. We learned, so if we have full return, then our desire is to get back to a traditional delivery of education because kids will be in person every day. Okay, with the hybrid model, we would start just like the high school with a 2-day a week for all kids. You know how the model goes, like 2 day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday clean day, and Thursday, Friday would be the second cohort. And so we really wanted to establish, get some things in place that things we found out that we didn't do, that we could have done better from the spring, for example, around the remote aspect of hybrid learning. So our committee is looking at consistent expectations for Google Classroom. Okay, so we'll have school-wide procedures for that, expectations that will be defined. And so everyone will be doing it the same way. And then instructional planning for like getting the information out to students, it needs to happen at the same time, at the beginning of the week. So our plan is as it evolves is providing, setting an expectation for staff that they would provide outlines at a set time each week, Monday or so, get that out to students. Establish like remote office hours during the week and post those, so that kids would know when they're available and they could check in. We talked about the 3 to 4 hours of screen time per day, like at school, and trying to develop our instructional planning to kind of limit kids to that 3 to 4 hour window of remote learning, online screen time learning. Google Meetings, same thing as Google Classroom. We're establishing criteria around that, like how often we meet, what kind of the format looks like, expectations for students. We're defining all of those things. So we are planning to run a maroon and a white schedule. I talked about keeping our schedule as normal as possible in anticipation of the hope that we can have a full return at some point over the course of the school year. So we're going to go with a maroon and a white schedule and alternate for students that are in for grades that are in a full return. What else? Let's see. Talked about. Oh yeah, I updated the numbers a bit, and from Meredith from this afternoon, from when we spoke. So we made some calls this afternoon. We have a 93% surveys returned for grade 6, and if we adopt a hybrid model for grade 6, 86% of that 93%, if that makes sense, would plan on returning in person under a hybrid model, and 79% of that 93% would plan on returning if we offer full return in person at grade 6. So I think if we offer full return in person at grade 6, we'll have good numbers there. I had sixth graders opt for, like, say that their choice would be a full remote, if just to give you a sense of that. So I think, and given the overall totals at what, a 42, and then I think we could our building capacity could handle that, a full return at grade 6 and a partial return at grade 7 and at grade 8. That would give us somewhere between 80 and 89 students in the building at one time to start things off, approximately. And I think, obviously, given the 7th grade numbers, that I would anticipate that would be the next grade to look at. But I would caution, I think I said earlier in another meeting that it's important to go slow to go fast. I think we need to establish routines and expectations, and before moving too fast, and that'll help us ensure safety and nail down our instructional planning and expectations a little more clearly for students. I think that is about all I have for right now, I think.
Any questions for middle school update?
I think I have some major concerns. I mean, I love how hopeful that we're going back to this full, in the future we're going to have everybody coming back, but I'm more of the mindset that we might end up being full remote, and I was choosing the hybrid model thinking like this is training for going remote, and kids doing 7 classes, which is kind of what they were doing last time with maroon and white at the same time.
Oh,
it's a lot.
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear. Aaron, I couldn't hear what you were saying. I had my volume turned down. Sorry. Make you repeat that.
Yeah. No. I think if I'm thinking that there's a possibility that we could be full remote again. Let's say that that's a possibility. Then keeping on the maroon and white schedule for middle schoolers with 7 classes that they're having to sort of keep track of. I don't think they have the executive functioning skills to do that. I mean, that's my concern. That's kind of what bogged us down as middle school parents last year.
Mm-hmm.
So like with the high school where they're sort of splitting it and kind of concentrating it and having 3 or 4, I could kind of see that.
Mm-hmm.
But with the middle school still sort of having so many different classes that they're having to keep track of, I think that's going to be very difficult, especially when they're home and at school and possibly going either way. It seems complicated.
Mm-hmm.
As a parent.
My thinking on that is sorry, I'm just adjusting the volume here, is that at some point, my hope is that we're going to get back to full-time attendance, right? So I'm trying to retain like as much normalcy as I can for kids and for students and for staff, right? So that when we make that transition, hopefully, we'll be we can just slide right in, and so that's kind of the thinking behind that. And I also thought that if whether or not, like let's say we have 2 maroon days in a row, like at the high school, the kids are still having just as many periods to juggle, and the how can I say it? So whether it's white or maroon day, they're still having all their core content classes on those days. At the middle school, the switch from maroon to white allows us to slide in a different set of special subjects. So for example, and I'm just making this up, but just to illustrate my example. So they may be having PE on a maroon day and art on a white day. So what would change in their schedule from day to day would be they'd have all the core content areas the same whether it's white or maroon, but a different special subject.
One thing I would say is a little different about the middle school versus the high school is that I think what's compelling the high school change is the idea of footprint and the mixing of kids in each, class, cross grades. Whereas the middle school, the classes are really pure. We're not going to have music classes in the same way that used to, mix grades together. So the footprint of students in terms of interaction with kids in other grades will be very, very low. And so I think from that perspective, it feels different than the high school schedule, which has significantly more regrouping in classes. But I think your comparison point is more thinking about students' ability to keep track of all that going remote. So that's something I think that the middle school staff can talk about and think about that aspect. I think, as Richard said, we're really focused on the safety aspect a lot, and thinking about how to minimize kind of interactions with people across grades, across buildings. But thinking about going full remote in the future is something that I think is on everyone's mind. I think Richard's trying to be the eternal optimist today, and I'd like to be that way as well. But I think, for middle school students, the breadth of courses that they are able to take is an important part, I think, of what is valued in our middle school. So there's also the balance of that, and trying to think about how to eliminate, a course in the day thinks about, or we have to think about what do we take out of the student schedule. Certainly we could do some other things like the high school's doing. I think that's something the middle school can take as feedback and consider how they might be responsive to that concern.
I think also, Aaron, we learned some things from last spring, right? And so in our instructional planning committee, we're really looking at providing students with more consistent protocols and expectations around like how we roll out Google Meets, how it's formatted. Same thing around Google Classroom, how we post assignments and those types of things, so that we have some consistency within the school building across like all grades and across all teachers. And I think the one thing that we learned in the spring, to speak to your concern, right, is that we didn't have that level of uniformity across grades and teachers that we could have. And the result of that was, a certain level of confusion and misunderstanding as students move, try to navigate the world with differing sets of expectations from class to class. you know, I think at the middle school we did a pretty good job overall, but you know, like anything else, we can always look for ways to do it better. And I think establishing those expectations will help with some of this. That's my hope, anyways.
And maybe you haven't quite gotten to this yet, but like I think I could picture what a week would look like with this high school schedule, and I get that that's different, and we're trying to. What would a week look like for the cohorts in the middle school?
What would a week look like? Okay, so in the hybrid, so in a full return, it would be like full return 5 days. So, but in the hybrid model,
but like in the hybrid model.
Yeah. So so we divide the kids into kind of 2 equal groups, roughly, right? Give or take, right? And so cohort A would attend Monday and Tuesday. Let me say it differently. I'm going to back up. So let's say 7th grade ELA class, right? Like they have a roster of, and again, I'm just making up a number. Let's say there's 18 kids in 7th grade ELA class, like a 7th grade ELA class. So half of those kids, they'd all be on the roster of that teacher as participants in that particular class. Okay. And half of them would attend on Monday and Tuesday, and half of them would attend on Thursday and Friday. Okay. But they'd all be working throughout the 5 days in the week on a common set of instructional goals. Okay. So they'd be in attendance for 2 days out of those 5. And the 3 days they weren't, would be a combination of things, just like Reg outlined. It'd be a combination of synchronous learning sometimes asynchronous learning, and sometimes I think I mentioned in my overview the importance of establishing like office hours, like, you know, clear, structured times when kids can check in with students. And so some of those remote times would be students and teachers engaging like in one-on-one or small groups throughout the week. So it'd be a combination of things.
And those office hours would work, but how does that work when they're teaching, you know, 2 different, you know, if they're teaching the other cohort during the time? I'm trying to picture.
Yeah. So and again, this is part of like our discussions that we're having, right? But what we want to do is sometimes it might be synchronous learning. You know, the kids at home might be joining the class via like we're ordering some you know, cameras, webcams that we can stream a class. You know, I mean, that some teachers are talking to me about doing that, and so the whole class might be together on you know, at times during the week. Other times, the students will be home working on assignments that are posted in Google Classroom, that they went over, that they received the instruction on when they're on the in-person class. So it'd be a combination of things. And I think the important thing is to it needs to be, to a certain extent, content specific. You know, whatever it is you're studying. Sometimes that might lend itself more to doing like a synchronous learning model, and other times it might lend itself more to an asynchronous learning model. So I think it's just the overall flow is that it's a combination of things, and so we're working with teachers now to provide to ask them what tools do they need in order to pull this off, and so those are the discussions that we're having.
And I'm not trying to grill you, but I do have another that someone else did.
That's okay.
I just have a lot of questions. So if a student decides, or the family decides that they might want to opt out of some of these specials to try to simplify their days, what will happen with those students during the time? Like, will they go to a study hall when they're still in school, or what?
Okay, so if they opt out of like what, like PE or something?
Let's say that they opt out of music or some of the specials classes that are the things that provide this breadth, but then you just say, don't want to do that this year.
Yeah, so I think, you know, like many things, especially in middle school, you need to approach it with the idea of, we need to be flexible here, right? And speaking of, I'm going to admit somebody into the meeting here. There we go, being flexible. So I think, especially when we're going, I mean, this is all new to everybody, right? This whole thing. So I think a certain degree of flexibility is, that's how we need to approach it. So, but what I do know is that, like right now we have band, chorus, and orchestra classes, right? And not all kids sign up for those classes. So this might be a likely scenario that you like. I'm going to assume that if the kids are coming to school, they're going to go to the core content classes. Okay, I'm going to make that assumption because that's, you know, that's pretty much the case. But they may opt out of music, or, you know, band, chorus, or orchestra. So we have that built into the schedule. That opposite that is a study hall. So if you don't go to band, then you're going to a study hall. So if someone opted out, we put them. We could make that arrangement that we'd put them in the study hall. Okay, and then other things like art is opposite. Like if you have PE on a given day, then the next day you have art, right? Like depending on whether it's a white or maroon day. So someone might not want to do art. And so I think while there's not a scheduled study hall at that time, I think, you know, a certain degree of flexibility, we'll figure something out to keep that student engaged while they're at school. Or work with the family, you know, like I've been, some families might want to have a partial day or something, you know, like, or something like that. There's a lot of different scenarios that we could encounter.
Thanks.
So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
It seems to me, I hear this in Aaron's questions, and I heard it with a parent of a middle schooler that was talking about that middle school is a time when traditionally we start to get the kids stepping up and the parents stepping back a little bit in terms of managing their educational process. Is not completed by any means by middle school. It's, you know, it's not even 100% complete by high school, but it's a transition. But I think one of the things I've been hearing is that it may be important to rebalance that a little bit to keeping parents involved when things are so complicated and chaotic. So, you know, I won't presume to say what that exact right balance is, but I think a little more communication with parents about their day-to-day children's schedules and assignments. Again, I know traditionally we're trying to back parents out of that a bit, but it maybe this is the time to flex on that a little and give a little more communication so the parents can help their kids navigate these pretty complicated schedules.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that speaks to like my desire to, you know, really like get that committee together that's going to focus on our school communications. And I think, I think like board meetings such as tonight are really going to be helpful because we'll have a little more definitive idea about like where we're going to go, and then I can get that information out. So, yeah, but that's. Yep.
Richard, can I ask, you mentioned what your plans are for the for lunch. So currently you just, middle school will just have one lunch period. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah. We might
and you said you're going to use the gym and the tent. Does that mean you're not using the CAF?
That's kind of my thinking right now, because we're trying to limit our footprint like down in the high school, right? So so for example, we're if we had shared staff, they're going to stay in one building or the other, and the same thing for lunch. So high schoolers are going to use the cafeteria. So we don't want to be sending middle schoolers down there as a potential, you know, intermingling for that.
So for students that do get lunch from the hot lunch.
Yeah. Great question. Yeah. So I need to work with Ben on this, and so we're gonna what my hope is, and I'm kind of preempting my conversation with Ben, but is that we have, or he has these, carts that can keep lunch hot or cold, and we could bring students in here, for example, and we can wheel that down and then distribute lunch that way. And if and again, we're still in the thinking phase on this, but like maybe students who bring a bag lunch, bring their own lunch from home, like maybe they'd be the kids that go in the tent, right? Or vice versa, something like that.
And thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I heard no calf, and I was curious about that.
Yeah.
So then, and I think I understood you to say your committee is going to work on what happens during the remote days. Is that effectively where we're at? And you're hoping for some consistency across the board? Is that what you had said, or?
We will have consistency across the board. Like we're defining those expectations right now. So I'm looking at our shared document. It's the work is unfinished yet, but that's the process. So we're posting weekly outlines at a set time at the beginning of each week. That's one expectation that we thought that's important, right? Because we didn't have that in the spring, and I think that will help. Like to Aaron's question, that will really help with that. How are we going to structure Google meetings? How often we're going to have Google meetings during the remote days? How are we going to, what can we do to streamline communications with students? For example, in the spring we had, there was way too many emails going around, it was nuts. And so how do we streamline that so that kids can receive the information that they need, but not like all this other stuff? They don't need 10 emails when one would do, right? So we're looking at like those types of things, those types of protocols. And we're also talking about things like synchronous learning versus asynchronous learning, and how often we do that, and how we keep kids engaged by not overdoing it, right? Keeping it within 3 to 4 hours of online time a day, for all their classes combined, right? So if one teacher gives an hour and a half homework or that something that results in an hour and a half time, we need to spread that out and balance it out across all content areas, so it's a reasonable workload. I think we talked a lot about our grading system, right? And we want to get back to what our traditional, what we call our normal grading system, as much as, where we're holding kids accountable to specific expectations, academic expectations. And I think, but at the same time, in this model, there still needs to be, we called it last spring, a little bit of compassion and understanding. But I think we need to get back to the rigor, right? Because that's what we should be doing. That we're doing right by kids if we're challenging them in the learning. So
just to clarify a little bit, you said how often you do Google meetings, and then also looking at synchronous versus asynchronous. Mm-hmm. Is it if you're doing a Google meeting, that implies you're doing synchronous learning, correct? Am I thinking properly there?
It could be.
Does Google Meeting equal synchronous learning, or does it not?
Not always.
It doesn't.
You might be having a Google Meeting with with one kid or a small group, on a Wednesday, say, right, or something like that. It could be, but it could also be, you have 10 kids in the class and 10 kids at home, and the 10 kids at home are joining the class via Google Meeting. It could be that too, right? We're looking at several middle school teachers have ideas around streaming a class, right? And doing things like doing a lot of synchronous learning, right? Like maybe their class lends itself to doing. I don't want to speak for any teacher, but maybe their class lends itself to doing streaming their class all the time, or quite a bit. And so
So
kids
that's
that,
not going to be uniform then, it sounds like, from what you're saying. Some teachers might do that and some teachers might not. Is that?
well, but I think, like Reg said, we're going to establish minimum expectations, right? And I think it also, like I mentioned before, depends on content area and you know, and where they are in the instructional planning and all of that. So I think teachers need to be making that decision, you know, at the classroom level with guidance from administration on like kind of a minimum expectation.
Thank you.
I would kind of, just to echo on Leo's points, I would strongly encourage guidance to maximize synchronous components as much as possible. We have small class sizes in Orono, and this is a perfect, there's a lot of benefits to that. And one of those benefits is it sets us up in a better place to have as much synchronous components as possible. And I don't see any reason why we can't do that. And so I hope that that's where we end up. And I hope that's kind of where we're directing people's energies and efforts to get ready.
Anything else for Richard? We do still have a lot.
More.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we try to make things as not only as simple for the students as possible, but also as simple for the staff and teachers, and try to guide them in that way that they are, you know, we're trying to make their lives a bit easier while providing what the students need. But it sounds complicated right now. And I know they're providing input to you, so I hope that you're taking it and kind of figuring out how to simplify things.
I appreciate that, Aaron. There's a lot going on, that's for sure. So, but I'm confident based on the conversations I've had with staff that you know, we're going to come up with a good model under these circumstances.
Kristen, ready? Talk to us about ASA's plan.
Hi, everyone. So good evening, first of all. I just want to say first, thank you to Richard and Reg for guiding me through a lot of these processes that are very, very new for me. I want to thank the parents, especially, so the responses were fantastic at ASA from the parent survey. And I wanted to also say thank you to, when I did phone calls today, the parents were fantastic and patient with me and answering my questions. And so thanks a lot to everyone for that. I'd like to thank all of the ASA staff for their patience as well. And I want to thank the ASA COVID committee, so to speak, our small group that's working on a lot of these things. Your patience and your answering of all my many, many questions is really appreciated. I know that this is not an easy task, and having an administrator brand new in the building has got to be tricky too. So I want to make sure I'm thanking everybody for all of that. So basically for this, I followed the same type of protocol for what we are kind of focusing on. The physical distancing piece, we have done very much the same as the other schools. Desks have been purchased in place of tables. And some of the staff are working to create orders with the seating cushions, so that that's another possible way that they can have some time away from a desk and being in a socially distanced space, sitting on the seating cushion, the stadium seating, those cushions. I know that there will be a large tent that will be outside of ASA. I'm not exactly sure where that placement's going to be yet, but we're going to definitely be utilizing that outside space. We have a lot of teachers very interested in doing some outside classroom work, which is very exciting. And I have, I'm excited to watch that unfold and to learn more about that. As far as the arrival and dismissal, so the ASA team has met, we've met 5 times now, and we are working still on what the dismissal is going to look like, but it looks like for now, the arrival part of it, we're looking at a staggered arrival. So like there would be these 10-minute blocks where parents would come and we would have designated spots. So there would be a spot if you had a 3rd through 5th grader that you would drop off. And then there would be a spot for, I can't remember if we decided on doing I'm not exactly sure, but there'll be the three separate spots that would allow that traffic flow to go a little bit smoother and to allow that to move. So that's one of the things that we've talked about. As far as when children are dropped off, I know that in the past it has been the gymnasium has been the place where they have gone. We are considering using that, and also again the tent, being able to use that until inclement weather, obviously. So we will have that in place, and using perhaps the music room, having designated spots, using painter's tape, having those designated spots placed around so that our little ones will understand what that distance looks like. So as I said, dismissal is an area we're still working on, so I can provide more information as soon as we get to that. For lunch, at this time, our discussion around lunch for our committee was to have it for the first month in the classrooms. So what that would mean is, and we're not sure whether, and this is also a discussion to have with Ben, whether or not the lunches would be delivered to us, or it's looking probably like that would be the best way to minimize the footprint through the school. But we would have it in the classrooms, and then we would also have a recess time either before or after that lunchtime, at which time that teachers would be able to have their lunch as well, because, you know, they need their time to eat as well. So that's our thought right now around lunchtime and recess time. Recess is looking like we are looking at different areas outside the building. So for instance, using the playground and using the field. And so students would be spread out and their times would be varied as well. So as far as moving along the corridors and stairways, we don't have obviously stairs to contend with, which is good. And the other positive thing about ASA, there's a lot, but the other positive thing about ASA is the way that we can move outside the building to access other parts of the building. So that would be a mask break, which is something that the DOE is encouraging for us to make sure that we're building in to our schedules, is to make sure our little ones get that chance to take the mask off and to breathe normally for a bit. And so that was one of the things that we had talked about, the possibility of going to, like, for instance, to head outside to get to the library, for instance, that they would go around to get to the library. As far as academic programs and student learning considerations, our specials schedule, so that would be the library, music, art, and PE. Our specialists worked great, and they shared a document with us on how to make this work, so that they're, not only are they staying with a cohort for a smaller amount of time, they're being, the word I'm looking for, but they're limiting the amount of time that they're minimizing the number of students that they are seeing, but yet everyone is still able to get all the different specials. So it's a 2-week rotation is what we're looking at right now. There's still some things obviously that we need to fine tune with that. So that's another area that we're working on. As far as enrollment numbers, I made a lot of phone calls today and to get some more information. But as it's looking right now, for 5th grade, which would be doing hybrid, which would be a split, it looks like each cohort would be 8 or less per classroom. For 4th grade, it looks like, because again, it's the hybrid, so it would be 8 or less per classroom. So for 3rd grade, it would be 12 or less per classroom. I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong one. I apologize. So for 2nd grade, 2nd grade would be 12 or less per classroom, now that we're going to be probably going to that model. And 1st grade, 12 or less per classroom, kindergarten, 13 or less per classroom, and pre-K, I'm still working on those final numbers. And so the hybrid, I'm kind of looking towards Reg and Richard to help with some of those ideas. I know that our staff has some fantastic ideas as well on how to make remote work well for our younger learners, 3rd through 5th. So we will work on that as well through working with teachers.
Any questions for Kristen on ACES planning?
Maybe first, I'd just like to thank Kristen. I'd like to thank Reg and Richard as well, but I know Kristen is a unique position here with having been on the job for less than a month. Where is that echo coming from? I can't see. But anyway, having been on the job for less than a month and having just met all of your staff, probably not even met all of your staff. So you're really kind of being thrown into the off the deep end here very quickly. And I just appreciate your jumping in and doing that. Other questions?
You said second would be hybrid, but that's since changed, right? Second's a full return. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Can we talk about what the outdoor time and the recess would look like?
As far as that, so the biggest class, trying to keep the numbers outside less than 50 is our goal. So the biggest class that we have is first grade, and depending on what the numbers, and I haven't gone back today, I haven't had a chance to go back today to kind of look and see how that would all play out as far as classroom numbers. So that, for instance, kindergarten would be outside on the playground. They would be together, and I realize that that is a grade level together, but I also know that it's outside, which is optimum for where they, where it would work best for that. Getting outside is essential. So they would rotate through. It would not be at the same time as another grade level. So it would only be that grade level outside on that specific space at that time. Does that help, Aaron? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good start. And I think I have a question. I have a couple of questions that maybe are Meredith instead of you, Kristen. So I'm not trying to. I can wait. Meredith, do you want me to wait?
Go ahead. If it's related to this, let's go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard this from a lot of people, and I think it is a big concern because I feel like COVID safety is kind of, the virus safety is a little bit opposite of active shooter safety, which a lot of the kids have had hammered into them for over the past few years, quite a few years. And so what has any thought been put into that across all schools, because now we're going to have these tents and it's going to be a clear spot out.
So, I mean, we are sacrificing some of the safety elements. That's the answer in order to take advantage of outdoor learning. And it's always a balance. I mean, we have classes that go outside right now, right? Some of our physical education classes are outside routinely when the weather permits. Our students are out at recess routinely when the weather permits. So we already have students using outdoor spaces. I think there's going to be an increase in that. And so, we have to have supervision in those spaces. There won't be students out there without adults. I saw a question in the chat, there will always be adult supervision when students are out in these spaces. So, I mean, that's the only and best answer I have. And I think it is a kind of a weighing of benefits versus risks. And, I think that during this time, outdoor spaces help us get back at school, but kind of like in energy discussions around ventilation, we're taking steps backwards in energy and kind of our efforts to have more sustainable practices. And then with school safety, we're kind of opening our campus more to these exterior spaces. And I don't have any other answer other than, that adults will be supervising in those spaces. Maybe any
Also,
other administrators?
Will those be used,
do you have
will they
anything
just be
else?
available, like you can schedule it for classes?
I'm sorry?
Will the tents be available, like will they be being used all day, like you could schedule your class out there?
Yeah, so Meredith D's been doing a lot of work and thinking around outdoor spaces. Do you want to just speak to that, Meredith?
So we are at a point of essentially having collected resources and perspectives around expanding our capacity for learning outside. And my hope is that in the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to bring those pieces together into a cohesive plan. Faculty across the district were surveyed about their inclination for moving classes outside. And we had a really enthusiastic response from almost 40 teachers across the district. So we've got 40 teachers who are saying, if given the choice to opt into outdoor learning, I want to explore that. And so now the challenge is figuring out what our outdoor capacity is in this unique situation of construction that we have coinciding with the desire to get outside. And then figuring out what sort of allocations we need to make. You know, there are some teachers who want to go outside periodically when it is conducive weather-wise, when it's a class discussion that doesn't require technology. We also have teachers whose desire is to be outside as much as possible for as much of the day as possible for as many days as possible. And our goal is to both provide the physical space that will accommodate that and some professional development to build capacity. We have some professional development that's been happening this summer for teachers. We have a teacher heading to Juniper Hill Nature Education down in Alden, Maine for the next 3 days tomorrow. I had a conversation today with 2 community members who, one, Ben from the Orono Land Trust and Deanna Fahey, who has experience working with grades 3 to 6 in nature education. And we are going to be hopefully expanding the reach of our outdoor education past our campus to include the land trust trails, to include a nature center up in Old Town, and additionally to bring in community expertise, right? So one of the goals is to build a database of community volunteers who have something to contribute with respect to learning outside or nature study, and make that available to teachers to connect with those community members to enhance our collective capacity for maximizing the impact of outdoor learning. So that's our trajectory. One of the tasks for tomorrow is I'm taking a walk with Brent and hopefully mapping out what all of our outdoor spaces look like and beginning to put this plan into action.
Yeah, so I mentioned in the chat, there are a lot of school level specific questions like, you know, recess and drop off pickup. And I think those are going to be best answered in some school level communications and Q&A sessions. And so, you know, that's probably going to be the next step for us to begin getting those out to you. And really it's, as soon as we have enough information that we think we have enough to answer questions, we'll definitely get those out to you. I know we're also working on, you know, just general communications to go out. Richard mentioned he has a committee, and we're working on some as a district as well. So I said to someone in the last day or so, I feel like we're building the airplane while we're driving it down the runway here. And so I think that's what every district is experiencing right now, and certainly what it feels like to me. And, you know, I hear the concern, are we going to be ready for the first day of school? And, you know, I think we will be. I think with this plan, it's a very measured approach that really tries to take a step that we feel like is manageable. When we look at the numbers in the building, we feel like it's a number that's a manageable start. And so, you know, I think that it's going to take everyone, though, working together, and it's certainly going to be a matter of trust, because we don't have all of the details that I know you want, and we don't have them ready right now to share with you, but we're working really hard to get them ironed out so that we can share them with everyone.
Kristen, sorry, I had to go plug my computer in, so if I missed this, I apologize. But I didn't hear what the planning was for the 3 remote days.
So I'm not 100% sure yet on that, Leo. I think that I'm taking some of the thoughts that Reg and Rich are using, and I'm going to be working with the 3rd through 5th grade teachers on that. And I'm not 100% sure what it's going to look like yet. It's been quite a process getting to where we are right now, and but that is something that we will definitely be moving on for next. So I appreciate your trust and patience.
Can you for the 3rd grade, you said it would be 12 or less, but is that what you, was that correct or?
No, let me double check right here. So I think it's a little bit different than, let me look. Because the 3rd grade has 2 teachers. Let me see. Oh. So if the 3rd grade would have, taking out some of the students that are choosing for the remote only option, would put 15 in each classroom. So it's approximately 8 per cohort.
Okay, 8.
Yes.
Okay.
Per cohort, yes.
Just like 4th and 5th.
Yes.
Gotcha. Alrighty, thanks.
Kristen, I think that you mentioned that those remote days are still very much up in the air, which is understandable to a certain degree, because obviously we're working on the safety first and then the in-classroom and all the things that we have to do when the kids are in the building. That all being said, I just want to make sure that we don't, kind of drop the ball on the remote portion. I recognize that there are challenges that you're going to have in your building with synchronous learning that Reg and Richard just aren't going to have. That being said, I think that just throwing up the hands and saying, well, synchronous isn't possible at the elementary level, I don't think that's true, first of all. And second of all, I think we need to ensure at a bare minimum, and I would hope it's more than this, but at an absolute bare minimum, that each student at ASA gets an opportunity to meaningfully interact with their classroom teacher each and every day, whether it's when they're in the classroom or whether they're remote. Because if we end up with a situation where we've got kids going multiple days without any interaction at all with their classroom teacher, in my opinion, that's a disaster, and that's unacceptable. So whatever is come up with, at the absolute bare minimum for me, there's got to be that opportunity there, meaningful interaction with each student and his or her classroom teacher each day. So.
Thank you.
And just to kind of piggyback onto that, just to, maybe it's overstating the obvious, but the few friends that I have that had kids in ASA last year, I think ended up kind of throwing their hands up and were sort of worn out, I think maybe from not knowing what was happening. So as with everything else, obviously communication is pretty key for that. But I do like Mark's thought of ensuring that there is a known time and there is communication 5 days. But so thanks.
Thank you.
I just to loop back with maybe to Reg, you mentioned that the flexibility to say, okay, we can add just 10 freshmen or something like that, or I'm thinking that through, and I don't see how that happens because those 10 are either choosing to be remote or they're in cohort B. So are you suggesting you'd be taking them out of B and putting them into A? Or I don't see a way to incrementally, I'm echoing, build back towards everyone there, other than, okay, all freshmen or all sophomore or something like that.
Well, I think, yeah, so that Wednesday where we're fully remote, so I don't see students in the building at that time in general, but it would mean taking that handful of freshmen in cohort B, and putting them in cohort A as well. So they attend Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And to me, that's how you do it.
In cohort.
They just attend all 4 days. They're just there. If I'm teaching and I see these 5 kids, plus another 2 that are there. And then on Thursday, Friday, see another 4 kids, plus the same 2 that are attending. So there might be a subset that just attends Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
I think we've talked about that before in terms of identifying if there are students who we identify really need that support before maybe we can bring back everyone, or there are students who really remote learning is not as meaningful or successful. And so that would, I think that's what maybe Reg is referring to, but
yeah.
You know, it definitely requires a certain kind of hybrid model. I think that's where you're going. It requires a model where kids are moving forward synchronously, continuously, so they're not on different kind of days of instruction depending on what cohort you're in. You might be doing this activity on this day versus another cohort. So it would require like almost a fully synchronous hybrid model. Is that where you're heading with your question?
Yes. Yep.
Erin, you seem to have a question. Did you?
I think I did now. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it will be some version of it. This was for Kristen, and I know you have a very complicated situation because you have some full return and the hybrids. There's lots of things to juggle. And that's a lot to manage, and they both need to be, you know, handled really well and separately. But I think one of the big concerns is this outdoor time still, like the playground time, is going to be something I think everybody needs to really look at and think about, because how to train the kids to be socially distant, and for those full returns, how to keep the teachers and the staff that's taking care of those kids safe with little kids who aren't going to really understand how to do all the things that even us, the adults, are struggling with. So
one of the things I had thought would be helpful is to make like short little videos to share with families, to share with their children, to kind of get an idea of, well, this is what it's going to look like when you're outside. This is what it's going to look like in the classroom. And I think one of the things I would like to do is, I know it's going to be very different for them to have a different principal for some of them. And so I also want to send them a video of what do I look like without my mask on? What do I look like with my mask on? And just some of those other little pieces. I wish there were more hours in the day. But yes, I think that some of those little videos, some things like that will be super helpful. Then you can watch it as many times as you want, you know, and you know, people can feel free to send me ideas of other videos they'd like for me to make, but that's kind of the avenue I was going to go down with that. And again, it's education for everyone, for staff and for students and for parents as well.
Any other questions for Kristen? Should we just kind of wrap up big picture, Meredith, before we move on to the next part about CRF funds?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think having the board give the signal on, is this the path that seems to make sense to move forward with, so that, you know, everyone can plan in confidence that that's at least the plan for now. I think that's what we always have to say. It's the plan and until conditions suggest we need to re-examine. And, you know, we haven't mentioned that the state's ratings came out. Those, the entire state is green. And, you know, I think every community, clearly that's what they said, every community has to take that then and decide what they have the capacity to design following all the requirements. And this is what we feel like is the right design for us to start out in a way with fidelity to all the requirements for safety. So I think that's the important thing to kind of ask the board for guidance on. But really tied up in that's one more thing that I think you might need to know to consider the whole picture of what we think is needed around this. And it relates to the second thing under this item, and it's the kind of additional support we need to be able to do this. We've talked about at the last meeting the extra nursing support. We have talked about at the last meeting custodial contracted services, and both of those were coming out of CARES money. So right after that meeting at the end of the week, we got notice that there, and you've probably read about it, we received some additional funds from the state in the form of something called coronavirus relief funds. And this is part of what Governor Mills announced when they made a big announcement several weeks back. It was right after our last board meeting, so it was a couple weeks back. And so the funds that we have are $634,000, but they have to be spent by December, unfortunately. I say that because there are things we'd like to do with these that makes it difficult because of the compressed timeline. So, the easiest thing to do with this kind of money is to buy supplies, materials, contracted services that for things that we need right now that can be done and paid by December. And we certainly are working on developing that list. Like those of you who aren't with us, if you look behind Richard's head though, on his Richard and Reg, you see the, the stack of, I don't know, maybe about 100 box fans that came in today. So those are the kinds of things we're using the coronavirus relief funds to purchase: the purifiers, the plexiglass, the signage, all of those things. But we also have some flexibility now that we have this in the picture with CARES to think about, okay, we were thinking about using this solely from CARES, like the nurse or the contracted service. Let's think about if we could pay some of those from coronavirus relief funds in the fall, and it helps stretch CARES money, which goes actually to the end of like 2021 for some of these others that we want for the full year. So that thinking, coupled with some further discussion we've been doing around needs, we have some other kind of hiring, staffing needs we want to bring to you that are part of this picture. So one of those is we've been talking a lot about staffing and substitutes and how it's really going to be a challenge, and also thinking about how we can have subs that are more limited with their footprint. And so what we would like to do as a starting point is to hire both with CRF funds, the coronavirus relief funds, that's what we're calling it, CRF funds. And then in the spring, we'll use our regular sublines for this one, is to hire 5 full-time subs right now for this entire school year. And they'll start, on the 24th when we bring all staff back so we can have training. But that we would have them spread out across the district. They would be school specific. So we're thinking a couple at ASA, a couple at the high school, 1 at the middle school, just thinking of staff numbers. And, they would be there ready to sub in the event of a need. But there will always be things that we can have them do if they're not needed in a classroom capacity that day. We're talking about extra supervision outside and, monitoring to make sure that people are following the protocols and helping with reminders. And so that's one piece that we would like to bring before you to ask to do. So in order to do that, with the coronavirus relief funds, anything we do with that, we have to only pay up through the middle of December, because we have to have time for invoicing, because everything has to be out the door spent by the 31st. So we can go through basically the middle of December with all of these things I'm talking about with CRF. So for the subs, it would be around about $44,000 in the fall from coronavirus relief funds to do that. And then in the spring, because it's more than just the spring, it's winter and spring, it's $47,000 that would come out of our regular budgeted sublines to finish paying for the rest of the year. So, and we budget $121,000 in sublines. So, that leaves us a lot of flexibility to hire other subs as needed as well. But we're just trying to find ways to have people here reliable who aren't, new people in the building to serve in the need of some staffing issues. So that's one thing. Another thing we wanted to do is to We've had a lot of work that we've done since we went into remote learning with our technology. And I think I've been the one who's been the last holdout on this idea in the entire district. But I'm convinced that we have to think about doing this for this year now. And that's, we need to hire someone to help with the tech this year, because there's going to be a lot of in and out. We think there's going to be moving from, you know, where we are starting the year into some other model and implementing it with younger kiddos who don't have a take-home program typically and lots of support needs. And so the other thing is, this is the year that we don't have, our Milty laptops are on their, you know, borrowed time year. And so we anticipate there will be more maintenance issues with those this year. So we'd like to hire an assistant for the tech department for this year. And so in doing that, it would be $24,000, like just under $25,000 through December. And then it would be, the balance of that would be $35,000 in the spring, or winter and spring. And then the other big piece, so let me just stop right there. So the CARES money totals $95,000. So if we shift half of the nursing costs to the fall, we shift half of the custodian contracted service to the fall, we shift just under half actually of all these costs. Also the core ed tech that's really going to help us with increased capacity with our students over there, shift that to the CRF in the fall. And then in the spring, we can pick up these costs for custodial, contracted service, core, and nurse, and that takes all the CARES money actually. So the idea of the tech assistant, the spring cost of that would be our budget, unless something new comes out from the state. We'd have to go into our, you know, contingency funds to pay for that in the spring. The last thing that we feel like we need to be able to pull off this plan is, I don't see how we can do what we're trying to do at ASA and maintain class sizes for the full return that we think are manageable with that age kiddo, without hiring another teacher really to help with that. So it would probably be a teacher who would be working in the remote side of things. But we need another teacher in the mix to be able to accomplish all of that, because the instruction at ASA is going to look really different than it will at Midland High for remote. You can't really expect a little one. What you do with them remotely is really different than what you're going to do with your in-person kiddos. And so we feel like we need another teacher to work in really the remote element of having a full remote classroom at ASA to assist with some of that. We do see there will be some other staff involved in remote at some grades. We see some potential for that, but we have to work with staff on figuring that out. So I really can't say much more tonight, but we think in order to do it the way we envision it being done, and it needs to be done, that we need another teacher. So that would be in the fall from CRF, about, this is an estimate, $35,000. And then December forward would be $52,000. So that also would have to be from our contingency. So the two items that would not fit in CARES in the spring, the tech assistant and the other half of the remote teacher for ASA, those two would total $87,000 that, if we don't get another funding stream, would have to come from contingency because they're not budgeted.
I would say there's at least a 90% chance that there's going to be federal money coming in. I mean, if not a higher percentage than that. So, I mean, even if it isn't, we've got that in the contingency, but I think there'll be dollars coming in for that. I think I'm in support of all of those things.
So, I mean, I just want you to have the full picture.
You're muted.
I know we need to take these kind of maybe in pieces, but I thought you needed to know the full picture of what we feel like we really need to be able to move forward. And this is what we know, like, you know, it might be in a week we realize there's some other capacity we're not able to find a way to meet, and we have to bring you something else. But this is what we have come up with so far to meet some of the challenges we've identified.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I was going to make a motion, but is there anybody who would like to split those items out so we discuss them separately, or should we just do it all in one motion?
Well, I think, I was thinking you should vote on the, are we going to have, do you agree to the kind of return plan, the tiered plan that we've put forward? And then the authorization to advertise for these positions maybe separately.
Okay.
Can I, with the assistant tech position, I had sent some communication to, I think, you and Brian, or maybe others too, about the potential. It would seem to me that I know we were thrown into the remote learning in the Google Classroom, and I think we did a commendable job with it. But my hunch is that there are probably companies that specialize in that audio-visual type thing, technology, that might make us better at that. I mean, it's either going to, we could potentially be all there, or it's going to be a significant part for probably everyone. I'm just wondering if this hiring a company on a fixed basis versus bringing in a assistant tech, a company that knows that business, interviewing or trying to find companies that could pitch how they could help us, in that specific area, and also to be providing support for staff on an ongoing basis, maybe through the first of the year. I think that seems like it would time itself pretty well, to show us what technology is available, whether it's different cameras or something, and also be able to support our staff for the first part of the year versus and again, I don't know what the role of the ed tech, I'm sure there's no shortage. I don't doubt for a second that we could use probably 5 assistant techs for technology. I'm just wondering if it's where this is such a key component of education at this point for us, if it makes more sense to explore that.
Well, we are exploring that through some other things I haven't mentioned in terms of how we're looking at using CRF funds. So, but I don't think those eliminate the need that I see for help with managing the assets and troubleshooting kind of the end user day in, day out. But we are looking at, one of the things that was a big challenge, I think, was managing all the web-based logins and sites that we were using that were great, but it got really cumbersome for students and families and teachers to keep track of. So there's some single sign-on kind of apps that you can, our subscription services that help you streamline that. And, so we're really in research mode right now. Meredith D's been working on that and has been digging into that. Also looking at, professional development, both internal and then external expertise. So, we're looking at tech resources and, supports and tools that can help us all do this easier, more streamlined, manageable. But I don't think those are mutually kind of, I don't think one replaces what I'm asking for necessarily, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But, okay. This $634,000, one of the big items on the list is like some of these tech subscriptions that last year companies gave us complimentary. They gave everyone in the, in the States, use this free app because we know you're having a struggle and need some support with this. And so now we're hooked and want to buy it. It was, also brilliant marketing. But so the ones that, we decide we want to purchase will have some support now to go beyond really what our budgeted funds would have been able to do with that.
Sure.
Yeah, Leo, I also kind of see it as apples and oranges. Just keeping laptops running, whether it's accounts, hardware, Google Mail that we manage, all those kinds of things is, directly responsive kind of situation, and it's often a crisis situation. And I think what you're talking about is more educational technology, which traditionally our tech director has had some experience and recommendations in that, but I think that's a different expertise and different type of company to bring in that would be providing educational technology advice. I admit I'm probably a little more skeptical than you about the value of those groups. I've seen them trying to sell me software at the university all the time, and they want me to fit their peg and not, they don't want to fit in my round hole. They want me to fit into their software. So, but I think we should explore that, but I don't see that as a substitute or an either or with, we got to keep 1,000 machines running not 24 hours a day, but whatever it is, 6 hours a day, is just a very labor intensive effort. And so the support for that.
Can I ask, I know, unless Leo, you wanted to continue on that subject, because I was going to change the subject a little.
No, nope, I'm good.
I know we hired a ed tech for the nurse. Are we comfortable that that's enough help? Is the nurse comfortable that's enough help? And how does the role of the nurse change with the hybrid COVID model?
So the issue of, is one person enough to help the nurse? It's really, what we talked with Karen Martin, our school nurse and school physician, it kind of came from them, that request. And we really haven't talked about more than that. They haven't inquired or asked. I think it's something that if we need more services there, it'll be one of the things we'll have to come back and adjust. But I think I mentioned the ed tech was specifically recommended by both the school physician and the state DOE school nursing services, because having the school nurse be the supervisor and then the other person have some training that the school nurse provides and that we have them go through, that allows them to be someone who can monitor students who are waiting to be picked up or do some of the things that our nurse is a very busy person, right, in our district. And so I think that this will really help increase her capacity to be able to deal with the more serious issues, and the assistant can help keep the nursing office going with the day-to-day items as well. So we feel like it's the right starting point. We may find we have to adjust, but this feels to them, I think, like the right starting point. But the second part of your question about hybrid, how that changes.
Yeah, what the daily responsibilities of the nurse, how are they going to change with this model?
I think it just makes it more manageable as a starting point, basically. It goes back to that lower load on the building, right? So you don't have as many people in the building needing services all at once as on a normal basis. So to me, that is kind of one of the major benefits of the hybrid model.
Other thoughts on staffing? So Meredith, I know you want to pull back out to the big picture and get feedback on that, but I'm thinking maybe since we dove into the staffing, we should just wrap that up before we jump back up. So I would make a motion. Sorry, I gotta add Richard back in here. So people watching from home, our laptops are all starting to die, and we're trying to find outlets around the gym to plug into. If you're seeing strange motions going on, that's what's happening.
I'm just glad that Mark wasn't actually taking off his shirt. I wasn't sure what was happening over there for a second, but I trusted you, Mark. But...
Yep, that's what's going on. So I would make a motion that we authorize the hire of 5 subs, 1 tech support assistant, and 1 ASA teacher, with funds to come out of CRF for as long as they can, and then out of the operating budget, and also to move the custodial support contract and the nurse support that was originally out of CARES into CRF to the extent that we can. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? You feel like I got that right, Meredith?
I have a question about subs. What do you know? Probably you don't off the top of your head. What is a average number of subs for our system a day?
On the high side, we might have 12, 15 across the district, and that's pushing it in a given day. That would be a day that has sick issues that are compounded by lots of PD happening in multiple buildings. So we usually try to keep an eye on the advance request items so they don't go beyond a certain level. This year it's going to be even more important, and we won't have a lot of staff going out for PD, obviously. So this gives us a good starting point, though, to have people who can be building specific and can be readily available, especially, you know, if a staff member has to quarantine for a couple of weeks. You know, we have someone who plugs into their room.
And I totally think we are smart. You're smart to get out in front of this. And I was just trying to confirm that I would assume we use that 5 relatively easily. Because the downside would be, obviously, if we go to 100% remote, then we've got 5 subs that are on payroll that are not in the, not in the building or.
Yeah, I mean, that's the absolute trade-off. But I think that those people, if they're in our building, you know, on a frequent basis, you know, we begin to find ways to use them, even if we're full remote, to support instruction. So,
okay.
You know, I think it is a trade-off with that.
But I think it's a risk worth taking for sure. So.
And I think to the extent there's concerns about the remote part of hybrid or whatever it is, more bodies can only help with that, right? More breakout groups at ASA, you know, more people to check in for homework help on algebra, whatever it is. So this is an intense time on teaching. So I think every extra body is going to get used for teaching. All right, so
I'm sorry. I think I was moving my computer to a closer power outlet at the time. Did you say an ASA teacher from these funds, or did I misunderstand that?
Right, it's one, the thinking is it's going to help support remote instruction at ASA. So it's yet to be determined kind of how that works. But we're looking at it and realize we really need another teacher in the mix to make it all pull together.
Okay, so one that would be dedicated towards remote instruction.
Well, this position is going to help us with the capacity for that. There may be a teacher at ASA who's currently on staff that said, I'm dying to do that. I want to do that. And let's hire this person to do this. I mean, someone else may put their hat in the ring for that opportunity as well, but it's to have the capacity with staff at large to be able to do that. But remote is what's compelling it.
it's to enable that function, whether it's this particular body or not.
So I assume that the new teacher at ASA, whatever they end up doing, will be hired under a normal procedure. But do you have any idea on how these 5-year-long subs are going to be hired?
We'll advertise for some, you know, permanent subs, and our substitutes will have the opportunity to put their names in for those. But we'll do a kind of a more broad advertisement because, you know, we may have other people who are interested in this because it's, you know, more consistent, guaranteed in one building. Might feel safer to the sub to take this kind of position over a more, you know, itinerant all around.
I think that's, you're going to get a different pool for those than you would normally. So I whatever the process is, I just hope that there's a rigorous one to make sure that we get the best people for those roles.
Well, I would say it's going to be rigorous given the timeline that we have. So I want to advertise kind of as broad as we can, as quickly as we can. But also, you know, it'll be probably a compressed timeline compared to what we did in May when we went through more of an extended time with, you know, the hiring process.
Meredith, this is slightly off topic, but it relates back. It's a question I had anyway. Is there any thought process on having some sort of I don't want to say child care, but some option for the teachers and staff for their kids, you know, with the hybrid option? I'm just thinking that might make this a sort of maybe a more highly coveted spot if you are a parent to be a full-time sub, if your kids can go, you know, at least the 4 days a week or something.
Can you rephrase that? I'm not quite following.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was discussion about staff and teachers having a childcare option so that their kids could be there more at the school more, you know, maybe in this filling up full time, like going 4 days a week.
So our childcare discussions right now are more around not necessarily giving them a full 5-day in-person attendance option, but if they're on hybrid or if we go full remote, to give them an opportunity to have some place for their child to be in a you know, childcare setting that would support their remote learning needs and follow the safety practices that we're implementing as a school district.
So,
Okay, I didn't mean to take it too far.
so we do have a motion on the floor about the hires. Is there a further question directly on the hires? And then we are going to pull back to the big picture again. All right, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Aaron, on the motion for the hires, which again, to recap, are 5 full-year subs, a tech support assistant, an additional teacher at ASA, and some juggling of funds for the hires that we authorized 2 weeks ago. So Aaron, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. All right, so now we're gonna step back out, and Meredith has asked for some feedback and some support for the board to continue proceeding on the planning track that they're on and that we've been hearing about. And so I guess I'll start off, but would like to hear from the whole board on that topic. I think I've said this already, but I'd just like to thank everybody who is involved in this planning. It's intense. Sometimes it's stressful too. It's dealing with some pretty big issues and some pretty strong opinions. So I appreciate, and it is the middle of summer. I know our administrators work over the summer typically, but a lot of our teachers, as Deb noted, are also stepping up too. And our administrators for sure are working a lot more hours than their contract says. So I appreciate everybody who's stepping up. And I do want to recognize, Meredith described it as building the airplane as you're going down the runway, which I think is a pretty apt analogy. But it's a pretty complicated version of that because you have to build a little bit of the wheels, a little bit of the wings, a little bit of the cockpit, and then you have to see how it's going. You have to come back and build a little bit more of the wheels, a little bit more the wings, a little bit more of the cockpit. It's really, there's just been a tremendous chicken and egg problem. You can't plan the education till you know what the physical safety is. You can't plan the physical safety till you know what the educational allocations are. And that's just the beginning. So, you know, I know people would love to just see the document that says this is everything we're doing and this is it, but it would be quite impossible to produce that document in anything that a backroom top-down kind of fashion. Orono culture is much more consultative, and to be consultative, we've kind of had to expose that chicken and egg problem where we're working through this piece, which has implications for that piece, and we're working through that piece, which has implications for this piece. So I appreciate everybody's patience on that. You know, so I'm going to speak to my thoughts on the overall plan. I've noticed that, you know, there's still continues to be questions about what we're doing with the remote piece. And I understand those questions. I hear part of the answer is it's going to be up to teacher flexibility, which I fully support. I don't think every subject, every grade, or even quite frankly, every teacher's style is the same. So I think it's important to leave that flexibility in the educator's hands to a large degree. That said, I also hear the concern that the remote not just turn into, you know, chaos for parents and students and lack of learning either. I don't think that's anybody's intention, but that's clearly something that's going to require planning, more planning than has happened to avoid. I certainly hear that the parents want a lot more questions answered, and I understand that. And I think the principals are we're starting to switch from where they're district-wide answers to principal school-level answers, but I think those are happening. But overall, I think this is exactly the right plan to be going forward. Yeah, I'm a scientist and I'm a statistician, so I think about this with numbers. There's three stages people are worried about. There's the stage everybody talks about is what happens if I get sick, and the numbers on that are pretty solid. They're 40 to 50% will have no symptoms. We've all seen the different mortality statistics, and the thing that's tough about that is people have totally different risk tolerances and totally different balances of risk versus education. I think this is where the debate gets very intense and very controversial and very split out. And, I think hybrid is kind of in the middle. So I think it kind of tries to bridge those opinions. We're never going to fully bridge those opinions. But I think it's the two steps before you get sick that are really the important ones that we have control over. And that is whether the virus is in your room or not. And if it's in your room, whether it gets transmitted between people or not. Right now in the state of Maine, to a rough approximation, about 1 out of 6,000, sorry, not in the state of Maine, in Penobscot County, about 1 out of 6,000 people is currently sick with COVID. Obviously that's too many, but it's not a very high number right now. So when you think that through, probably somewhere in this county, there's a school opening that's going to have a kid that's sick going to school, but the odds are pretty high that it's not going to be the Orono schools. We obviously don't know, but just taking a statistical perspective, the odds are we have about 1,000 teachers and students. The odds are quite good that we're opening with nothing in the schools. And I think that's a really key point, is so much of whether we can pull this off or not depends on what's happening in the broader context in the community. If you're in California or Texas or somewhere right now where those numbers are 50 times higher, and it's down to 1 in 100, all of a sudden we're looking at opening a school with on average about 10 kids and teachers coming to school sick. And that's just a totally different story. So I just think it's really important to acknowledge that everything we're doing is very dependent on that context. That context can change incredibly quickly. In a matter of weeks, we can go from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 100, literally that quickly. So we're gonna, I think it's critical that we stay on top of things. The state's gonna update their red, yellow, green every 2 weeks. That's frankly not enough. I don't think you can manage on a daily level. Anybody who watches the numbers daily like I do, we were high for 3 days in a row and then we were just low today. You have to look at a little bit of a longer term average than the daily level, but you also don't be wanting to wait 2 weeks or a month to make these decisions. So I think that's a critical thing, and I think we're aware of that and we're actively addressing that. And then you get to because it probably, if we stay in a hybrid mode or an open mode for the whole year, somebody will show up sick at some point. And that's where the safety plans come in, is making sure that it doesn't spread. And I think the scientific evidence is really pretty clear. It's about masks, it's about social distancing, and it's about fresh air. And it's about not yelling, singing, blowing into a bassoon. These are the things that make a difference, really, more than cleaning or anything else that you can do. And so we've taken those very seriously. But to me, any education we can do has to be in the context of meeting those key criteria, and that's what we're doing. So to me, this plan seems incredibly balanced and respectful of the science around safety. The whole point of hybrid is to cut down the load in the schools, not just when the kids are sitting in their desks, the most static moment on the whole school day, but when we're at lunch, when we're going between classes, when we're admitting and dismissing. So I think we may get down the road and find out it's possible to have more kids in the building, but I think it's an important precautionary principle. And frankly, I doubt we will ever get to the point where we can meet those rules and have all the kids in the building. But I think people have said, walk before you run, go slow to go fast. It's a learning process for all of us. And so I think starting out in that cautious posture is important. And then taking those safety measures is really important. So to me, this plan, I think, is really balanced, really carefully thought out, and really well addresses those key realities of everything could change in a moment if the community context changes. And in the meantime, we're going to maximize everything we can do educationally, including spending a lot of money, that's extra money that's coming our way, and a lot of deep thinking about how we can make use of that time while still respecting the safety requirements, which is really important to me also. So I think it's a great plan, and I'm really happy to see the planning continuing forward from here. And I will stop and let other people on the board talk.
So I'm not sure what now really is. Is it just a time where we can ask some general things or make general comments, or?
It's more of a general comment. I think the board, I've talked about this chicken and egg thing. So we're at a stage of planning where we've got some more feedback, and I think the administration team wants some feedback about whether they should keep going or if we think they're completely off track and should start over.
I think the only thing, like, I have a question of whether we should be looking at the calendar. I think this is circling back, and I'm happy with the hybrid model. I think we should continue forward. But with that model in place, do we need to look at how we set up our school calendar? Because, now with Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, the way the PD days fall and things like that, are we going to readdress that?
So
Go ahead.
I think at our leadership team, I think Reg mentioned that they had a good idea about on the weeks where we have days that are interrupted by holidays, that they would shift. So if we have a Monday holiday week, they could shift that week to where the instruction for that cohort that's normally Monday, Tuesday is Tuesday, Wednesday. So I think that's some of the thinking that's happening right now in terms of how to adjust our hybrid attendance days to work around some of our calendar holidays.
Can I also ask, is the state still mandating the same amount of school days? Like last year, they relaxed that. Is it still in place for this year to have a mandatory?
Trying to remember, I think that they have said that there will likely be flexibility again, but it'll be that boards would have to approve a change to the calendar and request a waiver to the state. So I think it would be a process that looked like that. But I think that, it would likely be considered, like it was this past year, and maybe a more forgiving framework than a typical year.
Other feedback for the admin team about speed with which to proceed with current plans?
I guess I'll say that I'm supportive of the hybrid model, so I think they should definitely go forward with it. And I would agree with Brian that that safety is paramount, and we've got to respect the science for sure. That being said, I very much view this model as a hopefully a short stepping stone to a more fully in-person return to school for those parents and students who wish to do so. As Brian said, the situation in Maine, and in particular Penobscot County right now, is about as good as you're going to get in this country. And if it stays that way, and we take Meredith's point that we use the first period of the school year to learn these new procedures and walk before we run, and everything, the situation on the ground stays positive, I would then kind of move to go from walking to, if not running, at least kind of a brisk jog as quickly as possible, and try and get as many kids back in the school as possible, obviously when it's safe to do so. But I mean, I guess where I would, it's not really a disagreement with Brian, but I guess where I differ a little bit is that I find it, he said he found it hard to envision a situation where we have everybody back in the schools this year. I find it hard to envision a situation where at some point before the end of academic year 2021, we don't have all students who wish to do so back in the school in person. I mean, and the virus dictates that, right? So if things continue to go to hell nationally, then that dictates where we go. But if things stay positive in Maine and things improve nationally, and the science allows us maybe to start to get ahead of this a little bit, my primary goal is to get kids back in as quickly as it is safely possible to do so. So I'm supportive of this model for now, and I hope it's just a stepping stone to more students back in. I guess I would also add, just, I'm kind of being repetitive here, but I would also just add that we really need to get this remote portion of this right. Remote can't essentially be, here's some work, go do it. That's not acceptable. So we have to get that part right. And the longer this goes on, and hopefully it doesn't, but the longer it goes on, and we have a situation where some kids are in school full-time and some aren't, then I think we start to run into equity issues, and we might have to revisit some stuff on that. So if this goes, into spring, and, we've got half the schools in person and 5 days a week and half isn't, or 4 days a week, whatever it is, then I think we have real equity issues, and we'll need to revisit that. Those are things for down the road. I think for now, I appreciate all the work that's went into this. I'm supportive of the hybrid model, and hope that it goes well and allows us to move forward. Thank you.
I will add, I am well as supportive of the model for the moment, and as we approach trying to get back to normal with school, I've envisioned it as someone running down the track with hurdles in front of them, and there's hurdles that we need to clear. And one of the hurdles was having the red, yellow, green status from the state. We've gotten that. To me, and I think I know it in my head, but just want to clarify for everybody who's on with us, the biggest hurdle that we have at this point is being able to achieve the social distancing and achieve the regulations that we need to in order to be able to bring everybody back safely. That's correct, right? That remains our biggest hurdle at this point.
I would say that's our biggest hurdle. And also, there are some rooms that, in places that, if 6 feet social distancing remains the benchmark of, what's considered to be the goal for how we achieve social distancing, that it will have to really rethink how we're using spaces even more so. So, I've seen districts are taking, their gyms, and they're, pulling this curtain, and, the gym's now a classroom, so there's no gym space for gym, and they're classrooms. And so it's things like that I think in some places will have to be done for a full return if all of the current safety requirements are still in place.
And I appreciate our willingness to bring, basically a third of our grades back at this time. And I feel like we're, trying to do what we can as far as getting students in the door who want to be in the door and achieve those, guidelines. I would just suggest, like Mark did, I'd like to see this go back to normal as soon as it safely can, and do what we can to make the remote experience the best that it can be.
Can I'm gonna use my spot. Leo, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna be the other side of it. Maybe I'm the negative one, but otherwise I would have been pushing for Deb to start a little bit later and to try to give the teachers a little more time to train. But I feel like, I'm hoping this is not the case, but I'm feeling like they need the time right at the beginning of the year to meet their teachers and see it, because I feel like when the college students come back and we have this inflow, I feel like our numbers would quite possibly go up. And so I'm more concerned about getting the remote right and getting the kids ready if they have to go fully remote. So I'm kind of the other side of the coin. I'd love the kids to go back full time. I just don't see it happening maybe this year, but definitely not before just, December, January kind of thing, hopefully, but when some science happens.
So I do continue to be, I think my major concern is with the remote portion. Obviously I asked about it with all the schools, and while I appreciate it's being left to administration, teachers, I do think we run the risk of essentially providing, you know, two-fifths of instruction. And I think, and that's concerning. And Meredith, we were just talking about the fact that that also is going to make it very hard to be fluid from hybrid back to full in person. And then, you know, hearing Brian's comment that he doesn't really expect us to get there, I guess only adds to that concern a little more for me. Especially, I did watch Bangor's presentation on how they're coming back to school, and they've essentially allowed for choice between the three models, which strikes me that as a district that's literally 5 times the size of Orono is able to offer choice, and yet we're not, with our, you know, small class sizes that we've maintained for years intentionally, still causes frustration, I guess, for me. I appreciate adding back what we can. The fact that we've added the 2nd grade and the 6th grade back, I do think we need to plug in that 9th grade as soon as possible to that, for the same reasons we've done it for the 6th graders, basically. This is not a local concern because it's handed down to us from the state, but I do have concerns about everyone sitting 6 feet apart and still having to wear a mask all day. This is a state mandate, I understand, so or I guess it is a mandate. But I would like to see, I guess, the science on masks versus shields, because I think about a young, in elementary especially, student who's meeting their teacher for the first time, and they're going to be looking at eyeballs all year long, and I think that's soul crushing. So I feel like there should be pushback on the state. Personally, I don't believe there's any support on this board for that. But where we are not, we're not deviating from the 6-foot spacing, despite American Academy of Pediatrics and the main DOE changing that to 3 to 6 feet. And I'm not advocating for 3 feet, but we've been firm that we're staying firm with 6 feet. I think the masks are unnecessary and potentially more damaging especially for young students. This is again not a part of our plan, but I'm also still really confused about the red, yellow, green. I don't believe, unless I'm missing something, that the state has provided any details about how they've come up with this rating. And when I look at the numbers by county, you know, there are some with 0, and then you look at Cumberland County with 1,800 confirmed cases, and yet we're all green. So I don't think we assume that's our ceiling. We can't look at what's going on in Cumberland County and assume that's our ceiling. But it really feels, I don't know, it's not unattainable, or just where they're keeping us in a gray area. You know, some of the comments, public comments earlier, were asking us, I guess, what we think, or what's it going to be when we cancel or when we go all remote, and we don't have any of that data from the state. So parents want to know, we want to know, and we're still just kind of operating in this vacuum that with nothing to it. That I couldn't answer that question. I assume none of us can answer that question. When do we go to remote, right? Does any of us have, am I missing something completely, and like the rest of the group knows this?
No,
No,
you're not.
So that's more frustration. Again, I guess that's not particular to our So I guess it's for that, it's for these reasons that I'm not supportive of the hybrid. I still feel like we should be coming back in a full return.
Okay, thanks. So, I mean, Leo, I actually agree with you about the face shields for younger kids. The science on that is that it's almost as good as a mask, and there's clearly costs. So I don't agree with the state about everything either. I mean, there's pretty good data at this point. A mask reduces risk by 80%. 85% of face shields are a little bit.
Of viral transmission? Is that?
Yes. Yep. Of when they go chase trains, people who are and aren't wearing masks. Face mask is about 85%. Face shields more in the 75 to 80%. So it's still in the same ballpark. Distancing a meter reduced risk by 80%, and every additional meter halves that risk again. So you start to put mask or face shield in 2 meters of distance or 6 feet of distance, and you've done a lot of risk reduction. And this comes out of it was a giant, they call it a meta-analysis that pulled together 174 studies that had been done to date and published in peer-reviewed literature and pulled it all together and averaged out these risk factors. And so I agree. Face shields versus masks is not particularly scientifically supported.
And I think that should be, I'm not suggesting that it'd be mandated, but I think that could be the individual's decision. I think, especially for a teacher, if they choose to do that.
Well, I mean, right now we're choosing to follow state DOE guidance and not go rogue. So just to be clear for people, we're requiring a mask. But if we were following, I also agree that the state has made no transparency around red, yellow, green. But in the end, they've told us every district's going to have to go their own. I think their lack of transparency is intentional. They don't want to be the ones making the decisions. They're putting us, volunteers, with less expertise on the front lines of making decisions. So we're going to be the ones that make the decision. I do think Meredith and I were talking, most of this has been pushed out to the schools at this point, which is where it belongs. But the 2 district-wide policy things that aren't fully pinned down are what kind of levels would make us return or to go in either direction, which would make us depart from where we are currently. In other words, if the community virus loads go up or down, when will we change out of hybrid? And what exactly is the protocol when, or maybe I should say, well, I think it's probably when, not if. I hope it's if, but when COVID shows up in our school, what exactly is the protocol? So there's still some district work to do on those 2 issues, because I agree, people need to know those. We may not be able to give incredibly precise answers, but I think there's still some more work to do and then communication around that for our district.
We've requested some clarification from the state on several issues around that because the return to school guidance, there are different thresholds that we're seeing. And so we've asked the state to provide some clarification. So what they say is that more information is forthcoming. So, I'm eager for it as well. Yeah. I really feel like this is not something that RSU 26 should be, deciding on in isolation. It should be based on, the best scientific thinking that the state, can offer us. So that's what, we're asking them to provide. And, the only thing that I've seen around the red, yellow, green is that there was just a little statement that said that it's based on a downward trajectory of documented cases and hospitalizations, robust testing, and hospital capacity. So, but that's kind of vague, right? So that's all they've said.
Very vague, yeah.
And, with the mask versus shield, I mean, the state, there is, someone put it in the chat, there is a path for requesting a medical or behavioral accommodation for shield. That's something that's going to be, there's going to have to be a process to have that approved because, the state guidance is clear, though, that masks are the preferred and what should be required, except in, these very defined exceptions, although they did put other health reasons, but you know, it's age is not considered in their guidance to be a reason to allow a shield over a mask. It has to be something other than age at this point.
The thing about that is every mask mandate, and there are 18 states or so that don't even have them, but every mask mandate mentions, almost everyone says, when you can't social distance, and we are doing our job in making sure we're social distancing when they're sitting in the classroom. So if we're in line with every other mandate, then we would be covered and they would be allowed. And, you know, it was 2 weeks ago that I think many schools were planning to not have masks on while sitting in the classroom. So, and I get that's a state thing that we're not going rogue, I understand, but hopefully that frees up.
Well, you know, I have to say that everyone has different comfort levels with this. And, you know, I know that there are a lot of staff and families who would not be comfortable being in an enclosed space, you know, for the time periods that we're all sitting together in these enclosed spaces without masks. So, you know, it's a little different when you're walking by someone and it's just this, you know, it's not that 15 minutes or more contact where, you know, we're having, you know, high school blocks are 80 minutes long in the same space. ASA classes, they're there for, you know, the full day together. There is some movement. So it feels a little different to me than, you know, I'm trying to keep my distance from someone when I go to, you know, Walmart, because I'm not staying by that person for that entire time. So, you know, I think when I read the detailed feedback from families on our surveys, you know, there are as many opinions and, you know, really strong feelings on this as there are kind of, you know, I don't know what, but lots of perspectives. And, you know, the bottom line is, you know, I feel like Brian said, it's, you know, I think this plan, it does have different populations of students in each lane. And I wonder how Bangor is doing their kind of, you know, a la carte option for returning to school. I'm curious, I don't know. That doesn't seem to be workable for us to be able to accomplish the safety requirements we have before us to do it in that kind of format. But this feels like the best place to be as a starting point to kind of meet, you know, have a full remote option available for people who want that option or need it, and then have, you know, our highest priority groups where we can to start full, and then have everyone else on hybrid. So I think we're doing similar things to Bangor, only it's, you know, we're doing it in more targeted ways where we have people in all lanes, but where we have the capacity to do so.
Yeah, and I mean, the school buildings at a certain level are a shared resource. So to some degree, you know, we can't go to the least common denominator or the lowest thing anybody wants. We have to find some compromise. I have to say, if we weren't wearing masks, my kids would not be going to school. It's just the science on masks is incredible. Science on masks and social distancing is just almost indisputable at this. I was getting into a distinction between masks and face shields. But the science on some sort of facial covering and the science on social distancing are just incredibly strong. We need to move on as a board. I think you feel like you got your consensus you wanted. There was one question coming up in the comments I wanted to quickly. A lot of people asking about UMaine. This is something we talked about a lot, and comes up honestly at every single conversation we have or every single public forum. It goes back to what I said. Today, the rates are low. When school starts, the rates are not going to be radically different, or if they are, we'll have to change our plan. But it is entirely possible that come mid-September, early October, the university has not just completely infected their own community, but infected the Orono community. If that happens, we're going to have to change pretty quickly. But it's also possible that doesn't happen. I don't think we really know yet. Most of the students coming to the University of Maine are coming from the upper Northeast New England area, which is doing pretty well on the virus. They have an active testing program. They have an active quarantine program. We just don't know. So all we have to say is this is an adaptive plan and we're going to adapt. But I personally, rather than wait till October and see what happens, I think I look at it the other way. We have a precious several weeks where we know things are still low and the university hasn't exploded and it isn't going to explode that fast. And even if we only get those several weeks in person, we can be teaching younger kids how to do the remote technologies, and that's part of the plan. We can be teaching, and everybody can meet their teacher face to face, which is a really precious thing. I think it'd be very hard to go straight into remote teaching. So we're going to have to adapt to the humane, but I think we should grab these weeks while we have them, because it's at least possible that we'll not have any chance for face to face again from September, October until the spring. So I look at it as a pretty precious time where it's safe to get together, and we should do it while we can, and we'll adapt as we need to. All right, I think unless another board member wanted to add to the general, I think the feedback was pretty clear to go ahead for now. And we all know it's going to change. We all have opinions about which direction it's going to change, but the virus will have its own mind and change. Well, the virus and our collective human behaviors will decide which way it changes. Okay, I don't believe we have any class size updates. Is there more than what we've covered?
So I didn't really highlight it, but on the updated survey results form, I added a column in blue for K through 8. Reg put it in the context of his school plan update, but you can see there, kind of assuming we were all in person with the kind of staffing we have in place, that's what the class sizes would be for the coming year. So I think that's what we're trying to build into our routine of doing in August. It's yet to be seen exactly what the class sizes are going to be. As we finalize our survey results, we'll be dialing in more specifically on those. So
I do want to comment, 380 at the high school. That's a great number. In any other year, that would be so awesome.
right, exactly. Any other year. Well, the enrollment study is really bearing out to be, coming true. So it's been interesting to see that play out.
Anything else from the board on class sizes? I mean, they struck me as typical class sizes in Orono and about where we're targeting, plus or minus a couple, which we don't have control over. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. I don't think there are any hiring recommendations. We have a policy, IIB on class size. This is obviously a policy that was written before we were headed down this road, and it's not really the policy for COVID time, but we're looking at this policy. Yeah, there we go. So this policy is for normal times. Obviously, what we've been talking about is the COVID time class sizes. But I would make a motion, and we did have a read back in June or July. I would make a motion to go ahead and recognize a second read, which would adopt and make enforce policy IIB on class size as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Jake. Computer technology problems making seconds hard. Any discussion on IIB? There were no changes from the board last time, so this is basically the policy that came forward from the policy subcommittee. Seeing no discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up is a school calendar adjustment. You want to introduce that, Meredith? You're muted.
I keep forgetting to unmute. So in your folder, there's a copy of the school calendar for this year that was adopted back in the spring. And as we were looking at the calendar and thinking about the school return, we have noticed that this window for K has over time gotten smaller and smaller. And when we looked at that, we felt like this was not a year to have such a compressed K start. So the school year used to start with about 3 weeks of half days for kindergarten as they started the year. And so this year it was down to 7 school days in the way the calendar fell. So we really felt like it was important to push it to that next Monday as we began talking about all the logistics and kind of what K and early grades really in general were facing, but for K kiddos who are just adjusting to school in general. And so we're recommending that we make a calendar adjustment to move that K half day opening of school phase out through the end of that week. Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up. Through the end of the week of the 11th, so that their first day would be on the 14th. And do you have the one with the red X through it? Yeah,
Mhm.
Rachel is not here this week and it's showing. I had to go, really basic on showing you this. So it'll look nicer when Rachel can work her magic on it. Yeah, this is what you could get today. So that's the recommendation. It requires a change in board action because you adopt the calendar. So this is technically a calendar change.
So I would make a motion to change the first full day of kindergarten to September 15th. Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second. You're killing me.
All right, so moved and seconded. I just think it makes a lot of sense given everything going on. Any other discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark.
No.
Okay, and I vote yes. Okay.
So ASA will begin advertising that out to families so they can just be aware of that change right away.
Next up, subcommittee reports. Unless somebody wants to report, I don't believe we've had any activity on any of these committees over the summer. So we could briefly update on construction. It's obviously visibly happening. We're already running into change requests. Meredith and we set up a process with the architect. Let's see, what were the thresholds? Up to 5,000 would be handled just between Brent and the architect. In other words, 1,000 here, 1,000 there, just based on technical expertise. Between 5,000 and 20,000 would be handled jointly by myself, Meredith, and Brent in consultation with the architect. And anything over 20,000 would come to the board for approval for change requests. 25,000, sorry, 25,000 threshold, not 20,000. So I don't know that we need to take a vote on that, but if anybody on the board is not comfortable with those, just so you know, we've already seen like 5. So these are occurring frequently. I don't think the board wants to insert itself into $1,000 change requests for sure, but that was the thresholds we talked about. If the board wants to request different levels, very open to that. We're into a routine. We're having a monthly meeting with the contractor, myself and Meredith and Brent, and we're having a monthly meeting on requisitions, which means paying them for work done. The architects are on top of things. We have a clerk of the works who's giving us weekly reports. We're getting weekly reports on a lot of other things. I guess even if I were outside of Orono, I would know construction happens because I'm now getting about 15 more emails a week on construction. Anything you want to add to that, Meredith?
I don't think so. I think I mentioned some items earlier. So I don't think so.
Yep. So, but so far everything's going well. Just the normal small issues showing up. Okay. Any requests for other business? Future agenda items. public comment.
Well, on future agenda items, I think one of the things that I think we need to bring back to our next meeting is some discussion, and I think board needs to weigh in on extra and co-curriculars, and how we're, you know, really begin to contemplate how this might work, and tied up with that also around the stipends for those, and when we want to make those decisions versus when we decide how and if those are events or groups are happening. So I think we need to have some dedicated discussion time on that as a board.
Yep. And that reminds me, I think you and I agreed, Meredith, we would go ahead and vote to add the 11th as a meeting. We can drop it if we feel like we can get away with dropping it because we have a meeting on the 18th. And I forget, you put the board calendar in the packet. If we voted on the board calendar, it's in the school schedule. So we voted on the other meetings.
Right.
All right. So I would make a motion to add a board meeting at 6 p.m. on next Tuesday, August 11th. Is there a second for that?
Second.
And the only key items would be any hires that might happen, and also COVID school reopening discussion. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, so we will open it up to public comment. Again, this is a board business transaction meeting, so we mostly just listen and take feedback. We're not able to answer questions. I know there's 1,000 questions, but I think that's really best to start to push out to principals holding Q&A sessions and answering questions by email and phone call. So I fully recognize the questions, but we're really just listening at this point in time. I would open it up to public comment if there is any public comment.
Hello, this is Shauna Goodall, president of the Orono Education Association. And as we know, our schools are buildings, but what makes our schools come alive are the people that inhabit them, the educators who have, in many cases, devoted their lives, their professional lives and portions of their personal lives to making magic happen. And without those educators, the building is a shell. It's quiet, it's empty, and there's no life. And I think, and I know that we need to communicate much better and more often with our educators. Tonight, there were 91 people on this Zoom call at one point, which from one perspective is awesome. But I look at all those names who I know are educators, teachers, speech language pathologists, nurses, librarians, counselors, ed techs, custodians, food service workers, administrative assistants. And why are they watching? It's because we have not communicated well with them. They don't have copies of these plans. I don't know why the staff should be the most informed people in the Orono system. So I would encourage all of us, board, administrators, teachers, nurses, staff, counselors, custodians, to communicate more. For administrators and the board to communicate more with the employees of the Orono school systems, to communicate more with the families of the Orono school systems, to communicate more with the students of the Orono school systems. And we also, all the educators, will pledge to communicate more with you. So communicate more, and also take a few moments and say thank you more. And say thank you in meaningful and unexpected ways. As the elected president of a 140 member organization, 120 member organization, You know, it's important to communicate with those people who put you in leadership. I know that. And communicate and thank them in small ways. So take a moment and reach out. Send a postcard, send a note, send an email. But don't make a blanket email. We know when everybody gets those. Take some time and really thank the people who have done the work. As we have taken the time, it probably doesn't seem like it, to thank you. So communicate and remember who puts life in the buildings for the students. And I don't know if I'm always sounding here like the Lorax who's speaking for the trees, or if I'm the kid saying the emperor has new clothes, or if I'm just Chicken Little talking about the sky is falling always. But we really need to communicate more. So if I could leave with any message tonight, it would be like the board, the administration needs to communicate more to the employees and the families of the Orono school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Any other public comment?
Hi, this is Jay Hubbard, French teacher at Orono High School. I want to make sure Shauna knows that the trees are listening. I wanted to say that we still have a lot of questions, and we have 2 weeks. And there are an awful lot of things that we're still exploring that possibility. We don't really know the answer to that question. And I'm really concerned. I'm really concerned that we don't know how Wednesdays are going to look. We don't know how passing periods are going to look. We don't know. There's so many things. The protocols, if someone shows symptoms, where do they go? What happens to us? What is the threshold for shutting back down? What is the threshold for opening back up? There's so much we don't know. It seems to me that 2 weeks is not enough to find all those answers and allow us to prepare for an entirely new sort of education.
Thank you, Jay. Any other public comment?
Hello, this is Kate Crane. I'm coming out as Kristen Briggs. I apologize. I don't know why that is, but I just want to thank Shauna and Jay for their comments. And I also want to say that I appreciate all the work that you guys have done to try to get us to this point. Tonight I sat through this meeting like you sat through the meeting, and it was a lot about the educational needs of the children, which is very important. That's why we're here. I didn't hear a lot about the safety protocols. I didn't hear a lot about how we're going to protect the students and staff. I know there's been numbers done as far as kids in the building, but as of when we had pre-K through first grade, there was going to be over 200 kids at ASA. Now that we have second grade, we're going to add more into that mix. And I just would appreciate if we had more direction on how we're going to keep the students and the staff healthy. Thank you. And thank you, Shauna.
Thank you, Kate. Any other public comment? Give it 1 more minute for somebody to jump in.
Hi, yes, Sam Coons here. Thank you for this meeting, but also I joined this rather late, I'm sorry. But I did hear the comment, Brian, that you made about the vast majority of UMaine students are coming from Northern New England. And I don't really know how accurate that is. I mean, I'm sure there is a large population. The majority is, so that's probably true. But the extent of other populations coming here, I think will be great enough to potentially have a significant impact. So I understand that, but I just want you to know that I'm reaching out to UMaine records and to admissions to get actual numbers, so we really have something firm to deal with on that. But I appreciate your time. Thank you.
I can just briefly, I have pulled out the numbers. The freshman class, 89% come from New York and the states northeast of New York. So, you know, you can think that's a high number or a low number. And I'm almost positive that the classes above the freshman class are more northeastern skewed than that class. So that's based on the UMaine admission statistics. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll go ahead because the board still has significant business to do. So the next meeting will now be Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. It will almost certainly be the same configuration with the board meeting in person, but with Zoom as a significant component. At this point, we have an executive session for the board. There will be no votes other than a vote for adjournment taken after we come out of executive session. So we'll take the vote in public and then we'll go ahead and ask people to drop off of Zoom. So I will make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056D, labor negotiations. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Leo. And any discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So we are now in executive session and we're just going to adjourn when we come out. So people are welcome to drop off of Zoom at this point.
Leo, I was too busy laughing at you with your second that I forgot to turn my microphone on.
Glad I can be some entertainment for you, Aaron.
Hey, you too.
Now you have a newfound appreciation for how good Aaron
Yeah,
is
oh,
at
for sure.
seconding.
I think I would have been, it would have been less complicated for me to just second. I didn't realize the format. I don't think I quite.
Yeah, no, I think you're on exactly on the right page. So, and we adapt as we have to.
Thank you all administrators for your work and for coming. Yeah. Actually, would the board like a 3-minute bio break here? I'm sorry, what? Yeah, that's true. I think Leo, I haven't seen Leo come back. No, I haven't. Huh. Yes.